Chapter 81, Jumping Clown, Part 3. I'd planned to eat in the cafeteria, but given how closely I've been watched lately, that seemed like a bad idea. Instead, I packed meals for the 3 elves by the window and set aside a special portion for Gus. Handing the box to the big, silent creature, my so-called dumb beast, I sent him straight back to our room. As I was slipping out, a lean young man with a drawn, sallow face stepped in front of me, flanked by 2 black-suited bodyguards. He looked to be in his early 20s, well-fed but perpetually half asleep, his pale lips curling into a lazy, arrogant smile. Designer clothes hugged his frame, and his hair was perfectly styled. Everything about him screamed privilege. "Wait right there," he said, voice quiet but dripping condescension. The beast beside me tensed, his eyes flickering with a cold blue light. Having grown up on Trial Island, he didn't care for titles or status, only intent. And the aura of malice around this fellow was unmistakable. I squared my shoulders, preparing for whatever was coming next. Ethan's eyes lit up the moment he spotted the simple-minded creature. He looked as if he'd just discovered the perfect new toy. "Hey there! I want to have a word with you," called the young man, brimming with confidence as he threw Ethan a disdainful glance. Ethan's face went cold. Without a word, he started walking away, leading the creature with him. Since he hadn't given any hostile command, the creature stayed calm, its placid gaze fixed ahead. Suddenly, heavy leather soles echoed behind them as the young man's 2 bodyguards stepped forward to block their path. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He leveled a hard stare at the young man and said flatly, "Move." The youth's cheeks flushed with anger at being spoken to so curtly, but he said nothing. Ethan resumed his stride. With barely a flicker of effort, the creature raised its head, its eyes glowing faintly, and in an instant both guards were swept off their feet and sent sprawling. Mere human strength was no match for its psionic force. Ethan passed by them as if they weren't even there. I watched Ethan and his beast companion climb the marble stairs toward the 4th floor. A silver-haired young man barred their way, his voice quivering with panic. "You can't leave the Elf Center with that creature." He was the region's most notorious collector, a flashy socialite who prided himself on owning rare summoned elves. The moment he'd heard rumors of Ethan's beast, he'd raced over, eager to buy it at any price. Ethan only smiled coldly. "This is the Elf Center," he said. "No one takes my summons out of here." Still fuming, the collector fell back as Ethan and the beast continued upward. At the top landing, Ethan swiped his access card, entered a small, soundproof chamber, and locked the door behind him. On a smooth stone console, he placed a crystal orb etched with faint runes. It split open with a soft hum. Black feathers fanned out as the dark crow burst free, and a half-dozen spectral shades spilled into the cramped room, their hissed whispers bouncing off the walls. Accustomed to the wide-open trial aisles, they seemed restless in this tight space. Ethan crouched to calm them. "Shades, you'll stay in my shadow as always," he murmured, hand glowing with a pale light. "Crow, I can't manifest you fully here. Please return to the orb for now." The crow let out one sharp caw, then settled back into the swirling containment field. The shades, subdued by Ethan's magic, slipped into dark moats around his feet. Outside the locked door, the collector's outraged protests faded away, replaced by an uneasy silence. Ethan rose, smoothing his coat. His beast companion, usually brimming with restless energy, stood quietly by, and for now, that was exactly how it needed to be. Ethan knelt beside the simple beast and gently patted its broad shoulder. "It's all right," he said with a warm smile. "No need to fret, you're just a silly clown at heart." The beast hung its head in shame for causing trouble. Wordlessly, it feared up its pack. Ethan sifted through the contents, bowls, tins, and packages, and arranged a portion before each elf. Though none of them had ever seen this food before, the enticing aromas filled the air. Still, they didn't dare taste a thing. On Trial Island, it was tradition to wait for the host's permission before eating, a gesture of mutual respect. "All right," Ethan announced. "Dig in. Everything here is new to you, so enjoy." With that, the tension eased. Plates were passed, and the elves began to sample their meals. Ethan settled cross-legged on the grass and opened his own dinner. He had prepared 3 distinct rations. One for the simple beasts, an assortment of canned whole fish, mackerel, sardine, trout, each with a heady, briny scent they adored. 2 For the dark ravens, a hearty blend of shredded chicken and fish. Though technically birds, these raven-kin preferred meat above all else. 3. For the menguizi, a modest heap of specially formulated granules, created just for the phantoms of the Alliance. As the sun dipped below the horizon, soft conversation and laughter rose around the campfire. Under the flickering flames, Ethan and his companions shared their first truly communal meal, and a moment of hard-won peace. Each morsel brimmed with the chilling savor of death, a taste that geese, of all people, relished most. At Ethan's word, the three elves fell upon their meal without hesitation. He hadn't offered comfort to the foolish creature out of any misplaced kindness. In truth, he didn't care for the young man at all. After all, if Ethan chose to peel away that human skin mask and trap the dull beast inside an elven sphere, nobody would ever recognize him. Even if the youth somehow tracked Ethan down later, he'd quickly learn that Ethan answered to no one, and should circumstances demand it, Ethan could strike with the lethal precision of his past life skills and vanish without a trace. He had absolute confidence in that fallback. In his darkest hour, he'd already exploited that beast's momentary teleportation to disappear undetected. But unless absolutely necessary, he refused to expose such tricks. Let the dimwits think teleportation beyond them. Once word spread, their ranks would swell with wannabe escape artists. Right now, though, this was the happiest time Ethan and his elf companions had known. No hidden threats lurked in the wilderness, no fear of ambush to spoil their feast. All around them, the black-winged crows cawed and picked at scraps, thoroughly content with the banquet laid out before them. Ethan sat at the long wooden table, surrounded by his fellow dark crows, and for the first time in ages, he didn't need to devour his meal at breakneck speed, bracing for an ambush. Today, they ate unhurriedly, savoring each bite as though it were a rare gift. The fare at the Elven Center was undeniably well prepared, fresh loaves of bread, tender vegetable stews, delicate pastries, but it lacked the depth and heart of his own cooking. Raised on the harsh trial isle, the animals he'd known survived on scraps and raw flesh, their palates never acquainted with seasoning or finesse. Here, each dish arrived paired with fragrant herbs, rich sauces, and exotic spices that elevated simple ingredients into culinary revelations. Yet even these masterful elven creations paled beside the smoky aroma of the steaks he'd slow-grilled over oak embers, or the salt-crusted fish he'd caught at sunrise. Watching the elves lean forward, eyes bright, as they tore into perfectly seared meat or savored a crisp, flaky fillet, Ethan felt a profound, unbridled joy. In his past life, Ethan had seen elves merely as tools, useful but soulless, and the dark crows had treated them no better, rousing their charges only when absolutely necessary. But over time, as he witnessed the elves' laughter, their thoughtful discussions, and their fierce loyalty in battle, he came to understand that they were living, feeling beings with hopes and fears of their own. By treating them with kindness and respect, he had forged bonds deeper than any chain. He knew now, without a doubt, that these once overlooked allies would stand and fight by his side, defending him just as fiercely as he would defend them. Ethan treats the lives of others, even those of his fellow elves, as expendable as blades of grass. Yet in his heart, there remains one tender spot reserved solely for his own people. Thank you all for your continued support. This week, I'd love to hear your feedback, recommendations, and any collections you'd like to see. Chapter 82, The Elf League. Early the next morning, Ethan slipped away from the Wizard Center. He peeled off the human skin mask and tucked away the dull beast in his satchel, keen to leave no trace behind. At the gate stood two black-clad guards, the same sentinels who'd been waiting for him since yesterday. Without a glance, Ethan threaded past them and headed for the coach station in Kugi City. The streets were quiet at this hour, so he ducked into a narrow alley. Once he reached its shadowed depths, he pulled the human skin mask back on, this one bearing the Alliance's official seal. One face isn't enough, he thought, adjusting the edges. Next time I'll pick up a few more. Having alternate disguises, he reminded himself, was as valuable as any weapon in a tight spot. Emerging into the morning light, Ethan's features were unrecognizable. He scanned the routes before him, weighing his options for reaching the Chengdu region. There were two practical paths. One, river cruise from Deadleaf City, Board a passenger cruiser downstream to Light Yellow City in the Chengdu area, then transfer overland to Keji City. It was fast and well patrolled, but the Alliance's watchful eyes on the docks meant he'd need his proper credentials. 2. Overland caravan through the winding forest. Join a small merchant caravan heading northeast. The journey would be slower, and the forest notorious for bandits, but a caravan provided cover and fewer checkpoints. Ethan paused, weighing speed against risk. If he could bluff his credentials at Light Yellow City's port, the river route would shave precious days off his journey. With a final nod, he set his course toward Deadleaf City's docks, his Alliance mask firmly in place. Chapter 12. Racing the Clock. Ethan weighed his options as dawn broke over Deadleaf City. The most direct route to Keji City was by sea, a cruise from here to Asan City, until he learned at the Elf Center counter that the last ship had sailed a full day ago and the next wouldn't depart for another 4. He simply couldn't afford that kind of delay. Instead, he settled on a faster overland route. First, the daily shuttle bus from Deadleaf City to Golden City, then the high-speed maglev line slicing through the Bayan Mountains to Manjin City. And from there, whatever connections he could find to Keji City. The maglev alone would save him days compared to maritime travel. Now all that remained was getting to the auto center in time for the 9 o'clock shuttle. Ethan checked his watch, tightened the straps on his pack, and sprinted through the waking streets. If he missed this bus, he'd be stuck here until tomorrow, an unacceptable setback on a journey already fraught with risks. Every step carried him closer to Golden City, and one step farther from the uncertainty waiting beyond the mountains. Ethan stepped into the bus terminal dressed in the Alliance's standard trainer uniform, his features hidden behind an unassuming human skin mask. With no Pokémon in tow to attract attention, he passed through the entry gate without incident. He flashed his Alliance ID, purchased a ticket to Saffron City, and took a seat in the crowded waiting area. To kill time, he unfolded the latest issue of the Union Gazette and began skimming its headlines. He was prepared for another dull wait, until one article made him sit up straighter. In large, bold type, the paper announced, "Intermediate Search Officer destroys rocket base, promoted to Senior Search Officer." Ordinarily, such a promotion wouldn't merit more than a shrug. Senior Search Officer is merely the apex of the mid-level ranks, on par with a Team Rocket captain, and there are dozens serving the League. But the name beneath the headline stopped Ethan cold. Yulongdu. Yulongdu, the prodigious king of Kanto, long whispered to be destined for championship glory once the Quartz Alliance splits into the Kanto and Chengdu branches. Ethan refolded the newspaper, his pulse quickening. A promotion like this could mean far more than mere paperwork. It might signal the opening move in something much larger. Ethan Yulong had just been named the heir apparent of the Yulong family by Patriarch Yulongdu. To understand the significance of this appointment, we must first look at the most powerful force on the continent today, the Elf Alliance, often simply called the Alliance. Over centuries of steady growth, the Elf Alliance has extended its reach across multiple continents, becoming the preeminent power in all elven lands. Every law, every decree that governs the elven world has its origin in the Alliance's High Council. How long ago the Alliance was first founded is a matter of legend. The names of its original architects have long since been lost to time. What remains indisputable, however, is the peace and order it has secured. Before the Alliance's rise, humanity and elfkind were locked in perpetual conflict, fragmented into countless warring states. It was only when a group of visionary leaders from across those factions banded together that the Elf Alliance was born, uniting the world under a single banner and bringing an end to the age of endless strife. Thanks to that foundational unity, humans finally found a place alongside elves in this world, secure, recognized, and protected under the Alliance's laws. And now, with Ethan standing ready to succeed Patriarch Yulongdu, the Yulong family will play its part in the ever-unfolding story of elven and human history. Despite its unity, the elven world remains vast, with multiple powers jockeying for influence within the Alliance. Today's dominant force holds sway over the Guandu region, a sprawling territory that spans what will one day be called Kanto in the east and Chengdu in the west. At the very heart of this domain, where the two areas meet, stands the Puppet Elf Alliance's headquarters atop Silver Mountain. Beyond Guandu's borders lie remote lands where our control is far weaker. Take, for example, the newly charted Aurora region. Its name is known only to a handful of high-level alliances, and most elves have never even heard of it. Although our voice in alliance affairs isn't absolute everywhere, it remains powerful. We must often negotiate with local authorities and make concessions to maintain harmony across the entire realm. Every region boasts its own 4 heavenly kings and a champion, each embodying the pinnacle of martial prowess. Yet none rival Kanto's 4 heavenly kings and their champion. In strength and reputation, they stand head and shoulders above all others in the Elven Alliance. The Kanto region, long celebrated for its vigorous alliance development, has become a breeding ground for prodigies. As new talents kept pouring in, the struggle for the 4 heavenly kings' seats, and, above them, the champion's throne, grew relentlessly fierce. Only truly exceptional trainers could ever hope to claim one of those 5 places. But when the Alliance discovered it simply couldn't accommodate the flood of rising stars, it made a difficult decision. Split the Kanto Quartz Alliance into 2 districts, Kanto and Chengdu. After all, each district is allowed only 1 champion and 4 heavenly kings, and those rules could not be bent. Expanding the elite ranks entirely would have invited endless disputes, so the Alliance held firm on its 5-seat structure for each region. Other factors, too, made the division of the Guandu area all but inevitable, and it was precisely because of that split that Yulongdu, whose strength had shot through the roof, was able to seize Chengdu's champion's crown. As for why he never claimed Kanto's champion title, Yulongdu's darkest scandal still looms too large to ignore. Chapter 83, The Golden City. Ethan remembered their last encounter all too well. He had stood atop those ruins as the self-styled Dragon King of Kanto, facing down a combined assault by Team Rocket and the Pokémon League. His reputation back then was near legendary, his power undeniable, but the world had shifted in the decades since. The alliance that once held Kanto in an iron grip had seen its prestige and reach crumble almost to nothing. Desperate to reclaim relevance, the alliance's leadership turned to the press, elevating carefully groomed acolytes into the spotlight. Newspapers ran glowing profiles of these up-and-comers, young trainers who'd been funded, supplied, and primed for public adoration. At the head of that list was Yulongdu, a charismatic elf trainer whose every signature pose and battle victory served as propaganda fodder. Joining forces with someone of Ethan's caliber would be the fastest way for Yulongdu to cement his status, and Ethan, conversely, would have a powerful ally in a city that still remembered his former glory. Behind closed doors, high-ranking alliance officials had seen the writing on the wall long before the public did. Their old strategy, puppet governors and backroom deals, was failing, so they threw open the gates to civilian trainers, hoping new blood might staunch the bleeding. But even as any commoner could now don the elf trainer's insignia, the real power lay with those whose loyalty was absolute. These obedient trainers, handpicked and carefully monitored, became the Alliance's true muscle, ensuring that its influence, however diminished, still spanned every corner of Kanto. It was a far cry from the Alliance's early days, when elf training was the exclusive preserve of nobility and high commanders. Back then, civilians lacked both the pedigree and the means to step into a trainer's shoes. Now the field was open, and with it came a fierce scramble for authority in a region clinging to old legends and new ambitions alike. As Ethan prepared to make his next move, he understood that alliances were no longer built on fear alone, but on reputation, resources, and the power of an eager new generation. Recently, as peace has slowly taken hold, open warfare has all but disappeared. Yet even as battles fade, the military might each faction has amassed continues to grow, and the Alliance's direct authority over the land has begun to slip. To shore up its influence, the Alliance threw open the National Trainer Program to ordinary civilians. Working hand-in-hand with local magistrates and elven academies, they invested seed resources in new recruits, nurturing their skills from the ground up. Over successive generations, this policy swelled the ranks of trainers, checked the rise of rival powers, and helped maintain social stability. That said, it remains far more difficult for a civilian to earn full trainer status than simply to be adopted into one of the Alliance's noble houses. Prospective trainers must abide by every rule, regulation, and training protocol the Alliance prescribes. Does that mean houseborn members look down on them? Not exactly. The Alliance recognizes two categories of trainers, those born into its founding bloodlines and those who join independently. The latter, often called non-lineage trainers, are simply civilians who have officially registered with the Alliance. Though their backgrounds differ, both groups serve side by side under the same banner and bear the same responsibilities. Young trainers like Ethan typically obtain their first elf through various channels and then meet the Alliance's evaluation benchmarks to earn their official trainer licenses. These new trainers are almost always civilians. Ethan's own ID designates him as a non-family member. Family members, however, enjoy a very different status. Once they reach a certain age, they're awarded the prestigious 3 Elite emblem, along with the elf portfolio, a formal certificate of their lineage. From that point on, they receive a host of lifelong benefits: complimentary medical care at the Elf Center, free lodging in Alliance housing, and other privileges. By default, one's standing, direct family member or non-family member, is determined at birth. Still, non-family members aren't shut out forever. Those who perform extraordinary service for the Alliance and pass its rigorous individualized assessments can be promoted to full family membership. Achieving that rank guarantees the same privileges for them and all their descendants. Naturally, this honor is exceedingly rare, a feat only true prodigies who outshine countless hopefuls ever accomplish. Becoming a top-tier trainer isn't the only path to full family membership or to making significant contributions. Excel in any other field. Master your studies to become an outstanding elven physician or prove yourself as a mid-level cultivator or higher, and the Alliance will welcome you into the clan just the same. In truth, only a precious few manage to defy fate and transform their lives. Most remain mired in the quagmire engineered by the elves. That's why so many recruits line up to join the Rockets. The tougher you push yourself, the more you're willing to sacrifice, the better your odds of success. Attention, please. The radio announcement crackled through the terminal. The shuttle to Golden City is now boarding at Gate A3. All remaining passengers, please make your way there immediately. Ethan looked up from the newspaper in his hands, momentarily startled at how quickly he'd read it. He folded it carefully, slipped it under his arm, and walked over to Gate A3. The shuttle was nearly empty. Seats were unassigned, so Ethan chose a window spot. He settled in, watching the terminal doors close behind the last latecomers as the engines hummed to life, carrying him toward Golden City. Ethan settled into his seat as the car pulled away, watching the familiar cityscape shrink behind him. "Elven world, I'm back," he murmured under his breath. Propping his head in one hand, he wondered why a realm brimming with elves hadn't developed a more advanced transport network. Perhaps, he thought, the elves' innate magic made long-distance travel so effortless that no one bothered to build better roads or railways. In any case, it had taken nearly 3 hours by car to reach Golden City, the crown jewel of the Kanto region. Stretching across the districts of Hualan, Yuhong, Deadleaf, and Ziwan, Golden City was not only Kanto's largest and busiest metropolis, but also one of the most renowned urban centers in all of Guangdu. Its skyline was dominated by the gleaming headquarters of the Silver Company, while 2 grand museums stood sentinel in the northeast quarter. More than merely a commercial hub, the city boasted the region's most impressive infrastructure: a high-speed maglev station linking Kanto to its suburbs, and an international airport offering flights to distant realms. Golden City needs no introduction. As the beating heart of the Kanto region, its strategic value to the Elf Alliance is immeasurable, and not just to them. With its vast wealth of resources, the city has become a melting pot of competing powers. Chief among these, aside from the Alliance itself, is Team Rocket. After all, one of Team Rocket's 3 senior officers, the imposing Empress Sylvia, calls Golden City home. Thanks to the city's development and opportunities, trainers flock here from every corner of Kanto. From Verdant Village to Celadon Heights, Pokémon of all kinds roam the streets, and wherever trainers gather, battles inevitably follow. Over time, Golden City has earned the reputation as Kanto's premier arena. Dozens of officially sanctioned battle zones are scattered across the metropolis, each hosting fierce contests that draw crowds eager to witness spectacular Pokémon showdowns. For the locals, these clashes are simply part of everyday life. They watch with barely a raised eyebrow as trainers unleash dazzling moves and powerful creatures duke it out. At the same time, the two great forces, the Alliance in crisp white uniforms and Rocket in stark black, jockey for control, each vying to tip the city's balance of power in their favor. Ethan called it the capital of desire. Beneath Golden City's gleaming towers lay an expansive network of underground arenas and battlefields, where blood sport was big business. Some combatants risked everything for a chance at coalition coins. Others fought simply to prove their mettle. And for the wealthy elite, nothing was more thrilling than wagering fortunes on brutal duels, using the carnage to drown out life's frustrations. Despite the Alliance's heavy investment in security, the city's underbelly thrived. In the dimly lit backstreets and shadowed markets, elf hunters, mercenary bands, and hired assassins plied their deadly trades, driven by the promise of vast rewards. Greed, vengeance, and ambition pulsed through every alleyway, every arena. Golden City was a living testament to human desire in all its darkest forms. To Ethan, it was as intoxicating as it was repellent, the ultimate arena for those who would stop at nothing to satisfy their cravings. Update schedule. New chapters released daily at 3 a.m., 8 a.m., 12 p.m. to 2 p.m., 8 p.m. If you enjoyed this chapter, please bookmark, recommend, and share. Chapter 84. The Golden and Black Markets. Ethan stepped off the bus at exactly noon, the 3-hour ride having left his limbs stiff. Clad in plain trainer's attire, he immediately melted into the bustle of Golden City's midday crowds. He released his 2 shiny Pokémon from their Pokéballs, enough to draw a few second glances, but in Kanto's grandest metropolis, such curiosities barely registered beyond a passing stare. Golden City was only a waypoint on Ethan's journey, yet as the region's largest and most prosperous hub, it offered every tool and supply a trainer could imagine. Today, his top priority was a professional energy cube crafting kit. Up to now, he'd been stuck with a homemade set, which limited him to producing only intermediate-level cubes. With a proper array of arcane forging plates, precision chisels, and calibration wrenches, he could manufacture advanced cubes himself, unleashing power far beyond anything he'd created so far. He wove through rows of official stalls, brimming with healing potions, custom Pokeballs, and elemental crystals, keeping one eye on the market's whispered secrets. Beneath Golden City's glittering surface, rumors told of a hidden black bazaar, an illicit underworld where forbidden relics, contraband species, and banned components changed hands. But first, Ethan would stock up on legitimate gear and get a feel for the going rates. Only then would he decide whether it was worth venturing into the city's darker corners. Although intermediate and advanced energy blocks sound only one tier apart, their effects couldn't be more different. Intermediate blocks do little more than speed an elf's growth and healing, at best. Advanced blocks, on the other hand, not only double those rates, but if used consistently, can even boost an elf's natural aptitude. It's no wonder advanced blocks command sky-high prices. Registered senior breeders are as rare and coveted as these blocks themselves. Under the Alliance's strict protection, they enjoy exclusive privileges, generous stipends, and priority access to the finest stock. Every advanced block on the market is meticulously trained and fiercely competed over by breeders who know its value. To ensure each elf receives the perfect energy block, senior breeders often accompany their clients as personal advisors, even bodyguards. Of course, each block is single-use, but its one-time impact can be career-making. After all, how many top trainers wouldn't pay any price for that kind of edge? Ethan flipped through the broker's price list, his pulse quickening. With costs like these, making the right choice wasn't just prudent, it was essential. As soon as you rise to the rank of senior breeder, even clandestine factions like the League or Team Rocket must treat you with deference. Your status becomes almost mythic, on a level with the legendary elf healers. Yet attaining the title of advanced breeder is a far steeper climb. Mastering the creation of advanced energy blocks is merely the first hurdle. And right now, the Alliance officially recognizes fewer than 100 senior breeders, each revered as an honored ancestor. Still, anyone who can reliably produce top-tier energy blocks will see riches flow in like a rushing river, provided they possess the power to safeguard those profits. That's why Ethan needs a bigger workshop and a complete set of specialized tools. Golden City teems with gleaming malls and elf boutiques, but where there's luxury above ground, a shadow market thrives below. Ethan knows that world well. After all, it's backed by the greatest power in the city's underbelly, Team Rocket. Behind the scenes, the true power broker of the Kanto region's black market is the Rockets. Golden City may be best known for its gleaming skyline and booming trade, but its real wealth flows beneath the surface. Here, tucked away in the labyrinthine alleys and hidden warehouses, lies the largest underground trading hub in all of Kanto, and it pours nearly 1/5 of the Rockets' total revenue into their coffers every year. At the heart of that market sits Nazi, the undisputed enforcer of the Rockets' superpowered division in Golden City. Feared for both her incredible strength and her mercurial temper, she brooks no challenge to her authority. When Nazi walks through those shadowy stalls, even the boldest smugglers bow their heads. The Golden City black market deals in everything imaginable. Rare arcane relics change hands alongside prized high-grade elf warriors. Whispered rumors say you can even purchase demigods from distant lands if you've got the credits to back it. For those with deep pockets and iron nerves, it's the ultimate consumer paradise, so long as you also have the muscle to protect your haul on the way out. Because in this den of barter and betrayal, the one thing more dangerous than buying is trying to leave empty-handed. Without strength, even a chest full of coins means nothing. You'll be picked apart before you can blink. Ethan was bound for Golden City's black market, the one place rumored to carry every tool for forging energy blocks short of divine or bestial craftsmanship. The Grand Mall might be safer, but its prices were through the roof, and Ethan only had 1,000 Union coins left, half already gone on the bus fare. He'd soon have to pawn something, anything, to raise more funds. But first, lunch. 3 hours on the road had left him, and his 2 elf companions starving. Spotting a low-key yet respectable inn, Ethan flashed his Union ID and booked a 1-hour room. Once inside, he placed orders for himself and the elves. The whole meal cost a mere 200 coins, leaving him with 800 to his name. For a modest establishment, the service was uncommonly friendly, and the food arrived almost at once, just what they needed before the real hunt began. Ethan nodded to Gysi, silently asking him to sweep the room for any hidden surveillance devices. No sooner had he done so than a waiter rolled in a cart laden with dishes. "Enjoy your meal," the waiter said courteously, then slipped away without another glance. They didn't linger over lunch. The afternoon held more pressing business. Ethan's Pokémon proved perfectly well behaved, eagerly sampling the new dishes. Gysi, ever vigilant, returned to trail quietly behind Ethan's shadow. Once they finished, Ethan asked the front desk to call a taxi. 30 minutes later, a seasoned driver pulled up curbside. Ethan handed over his last 200 Union coins, nothing left but enough to get him to the black market's entrance. Fortune, at least, had favored him this once. Once inside, he wouldn't have to worry about money for a good while. Golden City's black market was legendary, but entry was strictly regulated. Ethan slipped into a secluded alcove and donned his disguise. Over his clothes went a black cloak, and he tilted a wide-brimmed hat low to obscure his face. Satisfied, he approached the nondescript doorway. Inside was an ordinary Pokémon shop, dimly lit, cramped aisles, and only 2 other patrons browsing at leisure. Ethan paused at the threshold, steadying his breath. This was where the real work began. Ethan stepped into the shop and immediately noticed the crowded shelves, each one piled high with trinkets and everyday wares. Nothing looked particularly expensive or rare, just ordinary items meant to catch a passerby's eye. A store attendant materialized beside him, offering a polite nod and a practiced smile. "Welcome. How can I help you today? Everything here is high quality and affordably priced. I'm sure we can find something perfect for you." Ethan returned the clerk's smile and swept his gaze across the displays. He was on the hunt for pieces to add to his growing collection. I'm actually looking for something unique to collect. Could you recommend anything? The attendant's eyes lit up. Absolutely. Follow me. I have just the things in mind. With that, he led Ethan deeper into the store, ready to reveal its hidden gems. Despite Ethan's voluminous black robe, the receptionist seemed unfazed. In the Golden City, you learn not to bat an eye at unusual sights. Ethan was hardly an exception. He said nothing, simply withdrew the rocket ID he'd been issued on Trial Island. When Ying upgraded him from a mere trial player to a full-fledged Team Rocket minion, this card became his passport into the city's hidden underbelly. The moment she spotted the rocket emblem, the receptionist's expression flickered with recognition. Wordlessly, she led him into a dim back room, snatched up his card, and swiped it across a computer terminal. After scanning the readout, she handed it back with a faint nod of relief. Then she pressed a discreet switch beneath the desk. With a low mechanical whir, a section of the floor slid aside, revealing a staircase winding down into darkness. "Go on," she said flatly. "No trouble, no fighting." Without another word, she turned and left, sealing the door behind her. Ethan paused only an instant. He'd been through this ritual more times than he could count. He stepped forward, descended into the shadows, and melted into the hidden world below. Once Ethan stepped fully inside, the secret door slid shut behind him, vanishing without a trace. His footsteps echoed in the dim stairwell, where flickering lights overhead revealed just enough to guide his descent. For nearly 5 minutes, he wound down the stone steps before finally reaching the bottom. The cramped corridor opened into a vast hall. This was one of 10 such chambers scattered beneath Golden City, each chamber branching into 10 separate tunnels that wove through the metropolis above. Despite the city's immense size, these hidden passages provided direct access to the sprawling black market below. Ethan's route was monitored by the Rocket Corps, but their presence didn't slow him. He passed through the lone gate and stepped onto a broad avenue teeming with people. Their faces were expressionless and grim, and many wore the same black robes Ethan did. Blending in, he attracted no attention. Before him lay the largest underground trading hub in the Kanto region, a vast subterranean city that knit together the golden market above with the black market's shadowy network below. Here, anything could be bought or sold, provided one knew the right passage and had the courage to traverse it. Ethan strolled through the bustling underground district, where a maze of wide boulevards and narrow back alleys stretched in every direction. Rocket operatives moved openly here, no disguises, no subtlety, and pedestrians instinctively gave them a wide berth. As the dominant power in this black market beneath the city, Rocket's presence was impossible to ignore. Yet Ethan kept his affiliation hidden. Membership came with perks, but it didn't guarantee safety. If your apparent worth didn't match your true strength, the desperate scavengers prowling these tunnels, keen-nosed as hound dogs, wouldn't hesitate to strike. Venture above ground with your guard down, and you might never see daylight again. He paused beneath a flickering lamp. "Come out, Dark Crow," he murmured. With a soft click, Ethan released his Dark Crow from its Pokeball. The raven settled heavily on his shoulder, its feathers darker than midnight, its weight a reminder of how much it had grown. Ethan's own body had strengthened in tandem, though. He bore the bird's bulk without flinching. This was necessary. Together they would face whatever dangers lay ahead. In the black market, power speaks louder than words. Ever since Ethan released Dark Crow, the predatory gazes that once trailed him have begun to falter. The creature's fierce aura and the faint coppery tang of blood that clung to its wings sent a clear warning. Even the most desperate cutthroats here thought twice before crossing him. Though this was his first visit, Ethan had memorized the market's layout long ago. Vendors clustered by specialty, illegal alchemy in one alley, forbidden scrolls in another. Without hesitation, he headed straight for the elf equipment quarter. Along those crowded corridors, merchants hawked everything from enchanted bows to potions distilled from forest spirits. Tucked between the main stalls, narrow side streets hosted rogue trainers peddling their personal spoils, genuine relics mingled with expertly crafted forgeries. In that chaotic maze, only the sharpest eyes and steadiest nerves could tell treasure from trash. Ethan paid them no mind. His goal was simple: earn enough alliance coins to buy a set of energy crystal fabrication tools. These precision instruments weren't sold by street peddlers. They were stocked only in the larger, more reputable emporiums tucked deeper in the market's heart. With Dark Crow sweeping the crowd in his wake, Ethan knew he'd have the muscle and the cover he needed to get what he came for. Ethan pushed through the crowd and stepped into the largest shop in the Elven Artifact District. Owned and operated by the Rockets, it occupied prime real estate, its wide glass doors revealing row upon row of display cases and crowded aisles. Merchant stalls lined the walls, and in the center, dozens of appraisal counters formed a semicircle, each manned by a stiff-faced clerk wearing a gleaming rocket medallion on his chest. He navigated the throng with practiced ease and claimed the nearest vacant station. A small sign propped against the counter simply read, "Appraisal." Across the shop, everything gleamed: crystal goblets trimmed in mithril, carved ivory figurines, shimmering gemstones still loose in velvet pouches. Buyers haggled with sellers at every turn, but Ethan already knew the drill. Few ever walked away with a sale. Each clerk worked methodically, inspecting piece after piece under a magnifying lens before tapping at a datapad. When they finished, they looked up expressionlessly and quoted an offer. Whether merchant or casual collector, everyone paid a flat fee of 500 Union coins just to have their item evaluated, and the Rockets' buying price was notoriously low. It was a reliable source of revenue for them, but a disappointment for most who hoped to turn their heirlooms into cash. Ethan set his bag of curios on the counter and met the clerk's cool gaze. Quietly, he emptied its contents: a string of elven pearls, a weathered bronze brooch engraved with ancient runes, and a glass vial containing a shivering blue mote of light. He knew he'd pay the appraisal fee, if only to learn the true worth of these artifacts. After all, information could be more valuable than gold. Rockets isn't the only black market exchange in the city, but it's earned its strong reputation by refusing to gouge its customers. Word has spread that, here, buyers and sellers can trust the appraiser's word. And when you're trading in rare, high-value items, trust is everything. Once an item is authenticated, most sellers move quickly to rent a small street stall. There, with the Rocket appraiser's certificate in hand, they can command a higher price and wrap up the sale in next to no time. Anyone with a little capital to spare will seize that opportunity. If they could afford it, they all would. Ethan sank into the low wooden stool in front of the appraisal counter and waited in silence. Behind the glass partition, a low hum of machinery vibrated through the floor. With deliberate care, he unlocked the clasp on his travel satchel and removed a slender glass vial filled with a milky, slightly fluorescent liquid. Under the overhead lamps, the contents glowed with a pale opalescence. This vial was precisely what Ethan intended to trade for Union credits, the most valuable portion of his personal stock. Before setting out for the black market, he had measured out just enough to fill this small container. It represented roughly 1/20th of his total supply, half of what remained after he'd already sold off several larger batches. The rest was stashed safely back home, a reserve he could call on if the price here proved fair. He laid the vial gently on the counter. A moment later, one of the Rocket appraisers slid it under their scanner, and the machine, its indicators flickered to life. Ethan leaned forward, his pulse steady, hoping this time the reputation of Rockets would hold true, and that he'd walk away with the credits he needed. Chapter 86, Rocket Squad. Captain Ethan took a deep breath. After careful consideration, he had finally settled on the maximum quantity he dared to request. Earthcore milk was notoriously scarce, so valuable that selling too much at once could draw unwanted attention, yet offering too little would leave him short of the alliance coins he needed. He slid the proposal across the table with a quiet confidence. Across from him, the appraisal officer from Wanian's council sat motionless, his expression impassive as he examined the document. Ethan avoided looking at the man's face, instead keeping his eyes fixed on the single vial of pale, luminous liquid resting between them. Though he suspected how the officer might react, he wasn't entirely certain how many people had ever sold Earthcore milk to his organization. At last, the officer's steely composure cracked. He set aside the dossier and leaned forward, narrows his eyes at the vial. With deliberate care, he removed the stopper. A soft mist curled up, carrying a delicate, otherworldly scent that seemed to shimmer in the air. The officer's cold mask slipped for a moment, revealing genuine surprise. From his appraisal kit, he drew a slender silver probe, dipping its tip into the milky fluid. He brought it first to his nose, inhaling sharply, then touched it to his tongue. Almost instantly, his eyes brightened, and the muscles in his jaw eased. He replaced the stopper and tapped the vial against the table before him, as if convincing himself that it was real. Slowly, he pushed it back toward Ethan. "This is authentic," he said, his voice betraying a note of approval, and exactly as requested. Ethan allowed himself a small, relieved smile. The negotiation was underway, and with the appraisal officer's blessing, he was one step closer to securing the alliance coins he so desperately needed. Ethan stepped into the appraisal hall, his dark robe whispering across the marble floor. The assessor, a lean man with a perpetually hoarse voice, barely glanced up. "Are you here to sell?" he rasped, "or merely for an evaluation?" Appraising had grown tedious over the years. Most visitors wanted only a price estimate, never a sale. But whenever a truly precious object appeared, the shop would snap it up, and the staff would earn a commission equal to the item's appraised value. Their basic salaries were modest. It was these bonuses that put real money in their pockets. Ethan nodded once, then reached inside his cloak and produced the artifact, a small, opalescent sphere of what he called ground milk. The moment the assessor's eyes fell on it, they gleamed with barely contained excitement. This was the first time in ages something so rare had crossed his table. If the shop managed to acquire it, his commission alone would outstrip his year's wages. Under his hood, Ethan's voice emerged quiet and controlled. "I'd like to sell." The assessor swallowed hard, leaning forward. This is the heart of hearts." He paused as if tasting each word. "You know what that means, don't you?" Ethan watched the appraiser smooth his papers and clear his throat. "Currently, the market price for Terra Saporescence is 10,000 alliance coins per drop," the appraiser began, tapping a figure on his ledger. "Your vial holds exactly 200 drops. At full market value, that comes to 20 million alliance coins, and our Chamber of Commerce is prepared to pay you that amount on the spot." He leaned back, eyeing Ethan appraisingly. "Of course, 10,000 per drop is what outsiders pay, usually to weaponize it. True connoisseurs, the ones who understand its subtler virtues, would be willing to pay even more. Consider this offer our way of testing you, Ethan. Do you really know the market? If not, you might find yourself regretting it." The appraiser waved at the delicate glass vial standing just 5 centimeters tall. "Don't let its size fool you. If it were plain water, it might yield thousands of drops. But this essence is far thicker, only 200 drops in total. You yourself confirmed that amount when you transferred it into this new container." Ethan met the man's gaze unflinchingly. "If you're not serious," he said calmly, "I can sell it to someone else. Believe me, there will be plenty of buyers lining up." He paused, letting the implication hang in the quiet room. "And if you give me time, I'm confident I can find a buyer who will pay at least 20,000 per drop." The appraiser's smile wavered for just a moment before he masked it with professional courtesy. Ethan tucked his vial away, certain he'd driven home his value, and that the next offer would need to be far more generous. Ethan stepped up to the appraisal desk, his voice steady. "I only came because I was in a hurry. Let's skip the small talk." For a moment, the appraiser's neatly trimmed mustache twitched in surprise. In 10 years on the job, he'd learned to read people, and Ethan clearly wasn't the type to be trifled with. A flicker of embarrassment passed across the man's face, then vanished. Leaning forward, the appraiser cleared his throat. "All right, sir. Let's see. 15,000 Confederation coins. That's the best offer I can make." He kept his expression inscrutable. The price he quoted was reasonable for a quick turnover, even though it was well below the 20,000 mark the market could bear. Ethan met his gaze without flinching. 18,000. Silence fell across the busy hall as the two men held their ground. Then the appraiser nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. The bargain had truly begun. Ethan's tone was calm but firm. "Don't worry that my offer will be too high. If it were out of your range, you wouldn't even agree to negotiate. Now give me your price and I'll pay you on the spot. The appraiser hesitated, clearly thrown off by Ethan's confidence. Sir, please, this is beyond my authority. I'll have to check with my supervisor. All right, Ethan said, waving him on impatiently. The sooner the better. The appraiser gave a quick bow and hurried away. Ethan leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. A sleek black crow perched obediently on his shoulder, its dark feathers ruffling in the low hum of the black market bazaar. Better to keep a low profile here. After what felt like an eternity, the appraiser returned, this time flanked by a jovial, middle-aged man with a generous belly and a booming laugh. He studied Ethan coolly, but his attention soon fixed on the medal pinned to Ethan's chest. Unlike the other trinkets on display, this one gleamed with unusual brightness. A band of gold inlay encircled its edge, and two subtle R notches marked its surface. It was unmistakably a rocket squadron medal, and one far more valuable than any common keepsake. Ethan watched the portly man approach with a broad, shiny smile. Sir, this is Ishida, manager of this establishment and captain of the Rockets, the appraiser announced respectfully. Ethan's eyebrows shot up. Captain of the Rockets? Since he'd emerged from Trial Island, he'd never met anyone bearing that title. And as manager of one of the black market's largest outlets, Ishida's resources must be considerable. Despite his impressive credentials, the middle-aged Ishida carried no trace of a commanding presence, just a friendly, fatherly grin. This gentleman, he continued, nodding at Ethan, wishes to sell a bottle of fragrant milk. Please, follow me to our VIP lounge, and we can discuss the details. Lead the way, Ethan said, standing. Ishida beamed and strode ahead, while the appraiser fell in beside Ethan. The so-called VIP lounge proved little different from the main floor, a fully sealed room furnished simply with a leather sofa and a low coffee table. As soon as they entered, a maid appeared with a tray of tea. Ethan settled onto the sofa, eyeing Ishida expectantly. The meeting was about to begin. Chapter 87, Energy Blockmaker. Ethan settled onto the metal stool opposite Ishida, the City Hall procurement officer. Without missing a beat, Ishida nodded at the sales clerk. Sir, we'll take the price you proposed. Ethan flicked a glance at Ishida, surprised by how quickly the officer had agreed. He knew his offer was a bit above market rate, but the margin was still healthy, and they weren't pressed for time. The clerk immediately began filling out the paperwork. As the forms clicked into place, Ishida looked up, his tone casual. No hidden agenda here. Just curious. If you happen to have any extra ground milk lying around, we'd be willing to pay a premium for it. Ethan bristled at the question. Do I look like I'm running a surplus farm? This is everything I have. Ishida's easy smile never faltered. He waved a hand dismissively. Relax, I'm merely asking. He leaned back, eyes warm but assessing, as the clerk applied the final stamp. The deal was done, but the mystery of that extra ground milk lingered in the air. If you ever want to sell anything else, just come to us. Ishida smiled and pulled a silver-white card from his pocket, the rocket logo gleaming on its face. This is our VIP card. You'll get 5% off every purchase. Ethan raised an eyebrow. A straightforward discount like that was exactly his kind of benefit. He took the card and slipped it into his pocket. 5% might sound small, but on large transactions it added up, 50,000 credits saved on a 1,000,000 credit order. Of course, Rocket's overall profits dwarfed any individual discount, which explained why Ishida could afford to give away VIP cards so freely. At that moment, the appraisal expert, moving with surprising efficiency, trotted over and handed Ishida a sleek black card. Sir, this is the anonymous Union Bank card you requested. It's loaded with 3.6 million credits for the Geosperm purchase. Ishida took the card with a cheerful nod and passed it to Ethan. Ethan exhaled, relief washing over him. The market price for heart milk had soared to 1,000 credits per vial. He and his elves would need every credit they could get. With this card, he knew they were well covered. Ethan stared at his bank statement. He'd nearly exhausted all his credits over the past weeks. Then he remembered the real reason he'd come to the Academy's marketplace. Pulling his bank card from his pocket, he strode up to the supervisor's counter. I'd like to buy a complete set of energy cube fabrication tools, he said, placing the card on the counter. Medium configuration. Charge it to this account. Ishida, the portly supervisor with keen eyes, froze for a heartbeat at such a bold request. Then his face softened into a practiced smile. "Very good," he said, waving toward an appraiser standing nearby. "Prepare a medium-grade kit for this gentleman, and be sure it's the best you have in stock." The appraiser, a slender man with sharp features, approached and took the card. His eyes flicked over Ethan's simple black robe and then to the magnificent dark crow perched on Ethan's shoulder. That bird's flawless plumage and confident gaze marked it as the product of a skilled cultivator. Now the appraiser understood exactly who he was dealing with. Without another word, he selected the finest mid-tier fabrication unit available. As the machine was wheeled out, Ethan allowed himself a small smile. With that device in hand, he could churn out intermediate energy cubes at a breathtaking rate, truly like printing money. Ethan barely had time to sit before one of the guards called out, too breathless to explain further, and hurried off to fetch the items he'd requested. I cast a quick glance at Ishida, a middle-aged man whose plain features and slight frame seemed at odds with the quiet strength I'd glimpsed earlier. "I'm not familiar with these tools," Ishida admitted as he studied the assortment of instruments laid out on the table. "Will you be using them yourself, or are you planning to give them away?" There was a moment's hesitation, then a low, hoarse reply from beneath the folds of a black robe. "I'll use them myself. Nothing here is meant as a gift." Ishida's lips curved into a practiced smile. "Of course, Mr. Harper, and if you ever decide to sell your energy cubes in the future, you know you can come through my shop. Our fees are the most competitive in the city." Ethan murmured a quiet, and fell silent. Standing nearby, Shichian noticed Ethan's natural reserve, or perhaps a deliberate reticence, but wisely held his peace and waited. It wasn't long before the guard reappeared, flanked by the appraiser. In his hands he carried a large tray piled with small, intricate tools and several delicate components. Both men were panting from their haste, a sure sign they knew Ethan was ready and waiting. Ishida simply nodded toward the tray, then stepped back to give them room to work. Ethan sat quietly as Ishida approached, bearing a sleek metal tray. "This is our top mid-range energy cube assembler," Ishida said, setting the tray before him. "It normally sells for 1.2 million union coins. With your 5% discount card, the price drops to 1.14 million. Here's your card back. Your remaining balance is 2.46 million. Please confirm and take possession of the machine." Ethan studied the device. In his previous life, he'd handcrafted energy cubes by hand. He recognized superior workmanship when he saw it. This assembler was clearly genuine, precisely calibrated, and flawlessly finished. He couldn't recall ever encountering better quality, especially on the black market. No wonder Ishida claimed the title of manager. Ethan gave a slight nod. With a casual flick of his hand, he lifted the tray, and under the folds of his dark robe, slipped both the assembler and the payment card into his storage belt. Without another word, he rose and walked out of the VIP room. Ishida watched him go. For a moment, the manager's practiced smile faltered, and a furrow appeared between his brows. Ethan paused at the door. The appraisal clerk, who'd been lingering inside, stepped forward tentatively. "Sir, would you like us to send someone to follow you?" On the surface, this shop looked like any other respectable establishment. In truth, it was a front for the black market, run by the Rockets, and they orchestrated deals like this every day. But there was one rule they never broke. They didn't mess with anyone too dangerous. Ishida, personal manager to Nazi, studied Ethan's back carefully. He could sense the risk in trailing him. Any overt surveillance might spook an intermediate breeder client and cost them their business. After a moment's hesitation, Ishida shook his head. "No, thank you. We can't afford to blow our cover. If we send someone after him and he notices, we'll lose our other intermediate breeder customers." The clerk bowed respectfully. "Understood, sir. I'll still keep an eye on our incoming shipments. If any unauthorized goods turn up," he let his gaze sharpen, "we'll seize whoever's responsible." "Good," Ishida replied. "Stay alert." 200 drops of heart milk was a calculated gamble, just enough to attract attention, but not so much as to offend an intermediate breeder. Any more, though, and they might cross a line they couldn't uncross. Ethan knew he was skirting that edge right now. And Ishida, ever the pragmatist, was already weighing Ethan's true value to Nazi's operation. In the Rockets world, every move was measured, every player rated, and no one was taken lightly. When people feel confident, sure of their strength or their credit, they won't hesitate to kill for a prized item. But when they're uncertain, when they've got nothing to back them up, they simply walk away. Ethan knew this well. He'd just left the biggest props emporium in the black market, his cover still intact and his money safely hidden, and though no one had seen him with a pouch of credits, a handful of onlookers had noted him slipping into the VIP chamber. Predictably, a few of them stuck around when he emerged. He expected it. In a sprawling, maze-like bazaar like this, tails were inevitable. As soon as they started to follow, he pivoted sharply into a narrow corridor. He ducked through 3 more winding passages, each one carefully chosen, and finally lost them in the tangle of stalls and shadows. By the time he slowed down, the alleys were quiet again, and Ethan was alone. If you enjoyed this chapter, please leave a recommendation. Chapter 88, What Scorpion? Ethan slipped away from the small crowd tailing him and made his way to a nearly ruined storefront that stood in stark contrast to its more prosperous neighbors. Pushing open the creaking door, he was greeted by battered shelves lined with moldy scraps of food and thick cobwebs swaying in the stale air. A sour stench of decay hung heavy inside. He paused at the threshold, eyebrows drawn together, but he didn't turn back. In a past life, this was his go-to haunt, a leather mask shop. Though the place looked on its last legs, it still carried a certain renown in the black market. If only it weren't so dilapidated, its master craftsman would surely dominate the legitimate trade. Legend said the owner was an eccentric virtuoso who despised publicity. He shunned clients unless they arrived on his terms, letting whispers of his skills spread only among a handful of trusted regulars. Those few patrons were all that kept the shop's lights flickering. Ethan stepped forward, brushing aside a strand of spider silk that threatened to fall across his face. He inhaled deeply. Tonight, he hoped, the old man would finally have exactly what he needed. Ethan felt the crow on his shoulder ruffle its feathers as a foul stench drifted through the cramped shop. The bird tilted its head, angling itself downwind to escape the worst of the spider silk mildew that coated every surface. Stepping past rows of jagged glass jars and tangled webs, Ethan made his way to the back, where an unkempt old man in round spectacles hunched over a cluttered counter. Beside him sat a sharply dressed assistant, who barely glanced up, more absorbed in the half-finished human skin mask under the old man's careful fingers. Ethan didn't mind their indifference. He'd learned long ago that this proprietor had little patience for customers, yet no one could match him for craftsmanship. Day after day, the old mask maker would labor over a new face, only to toss it aside when it failed to meet his exacting standards. Then he'd begin again, eyes gleaming, unwilling even to leave his workbench except for the bare necessities of food and sleep. 5 masks, Ethan said, pressing a hand to his nose as the sour odor of the old man's unwashed body threatened to overwhelm him. I need 5 finished masks by tomorrow night. The old man didn't pause his work. His gnarled hands continued stitching edges and smoothing seams, as though Ethan weren't even there. Finally, without looking up, he spoke in a dry croak. 5 masks, double the usual price, plus rush fee. You know the terms. Ethan nodded. He'd expected nothing less. He set a small pouch of coins on the counter. The crow gave an approving caw, and Ethan settled in to wait, certain that by dawn the masks would be ready and perfect, just as he needed them. Ethan stepped into the dimly lit shop. Masks, some smooth and pale as skin, others twisted and grotesque, lay scattered on the dusty floor. Behind a battered counter, the proprietor lounged in shadow. Without looking up, he grunted, "The masks are all on the ground. Pick whichever you like. When you're ready, swipe your card on that reader. 20,000 union coins per mask. Don't like one? Just swipe anyway and move on. I'll be right here if you need anything." Ethan had long since grown accustomed to this odd sales pitch. He browsed the collection, simple human skin replicas, a few carved bone pieces, a couple with painted eyes that seemed almost alive. He finally settled on 5 masks and tapped his card. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 100,000 union coins vanished in a blink. Most shops offered mass-produced face masks at a fraction of the price, but none could match this place's claim. Every mask was unique. never duplicated, each bearing its own style and secret craftsmanship. That was worth the steep fee. He slipped the masks into his pack and hurried outside. The stench inside still clung to his clothes. On his shoulder, the black crow, his constant companion, shook out its feathers and let out a raspy caw, as if grateful to be in her air. Ethan offered it a wry smile. "Easy, buddy. We'll get used to it. One step at a time." With that, he set off down the street, the masks safely stowed and a new adventure already unfolding. "Sometimes an opponent's stench can be far worse than what you've smelled in that shop," Ethan said with a grin. "Rotten swamp flowers, mud as black as oil, or even some of those foul-smelling elves. Believe me, you won't forget it once you've faced it." The dark crow perched on his shoulder let out a startled caw, feathers bristling. It looked like it could hardly imagine surviving such a scent. Ethan laughed and ruffled its glossy black wing. "Don't worry, you'll learn soon enough." Together they slipped away down a deserted lane and ducked into a narrow alley, out of sight of any passers-by. Ethan paused and glanced at his reflection in a grimy puddle. "We're heading back into the black market next. I'd rather not go in wearing this face. Too easy to remember." He reached into his belt pouch and pulled out a freshly purchased human skin mask. The craftsman who'd made it had clearly blushed at the request, but the work was impeccable. The mask was wafer-thin, translucent like a cicada's wing, and impossibly lifelike. Ethan pressed the smooth edge of the mask to his forehead, feeling its chill against his skin. With careful adjustments, he molded it around his features. A few final touches at the jawline, and the disguise was perfect. Where once stood a creature of shadow, now appeared an ordinary young man, no hint of the face beneath. Satisfied, Ethan straightened his shoulders. The dark market would remember this new face, but they would never know who he really was. Ethan had barely pressed the half-skull mask into place when hurried, panicked footsteps shattered the alley's silence. He slipped into a narrow gap between two crumbling walls, pressing one hand to the elven orb at his waist. If things went south, he could shatter the orb to unleash his dull beast, a hulking creature fierce despite its sluggish name, and, if needed, vanish in a flash of darkness by activating his dark crow mobility skill. "Did you actually lose our tails?" A sharp voice hissed from just around the corner. Ethan's heart thudded. He'd assumed anyone chasing him had given up in the black market's chaos. He ducked into this dead end solely to change masks before venturing back into the crowd. He never expected company here. The footsteps stopped. Fingers curled on the orb's polished surface as Ethan braced for combat, until a second voice spoke, cool and irritated. "We're not in any hurry to leave the black market, brother. Why sneak off down a rat-infested alley like this?" A sudden smack echoed off the brick as one man slapped his companion across the back of the head. "Quit whining, Ryu," the first growled. Ethan stifled a breath. These two clearly weren't after him. But who were they, and what had brought them so recklessly into this forgotten corner of town? He pressed himself deeper into shadow, determined to find out. In the shadowed alley behind the Golden Market, two thieves crouched against a crumbling brick wall, voices barely above a whisper. "Keep your head down," hissed the taller man. "No one's spotted us yet. Let's stay put until the guards clear out. Then we slip away with the egg and make our sale today." His partner shifted uneasily, glancing over his shoulder. "All that risk for an elven egg? I've never even seen one. Are you sure it's worth it?" A harsh laugh came in reply. "Worth it? Of course. If I didn't know it was valuable, do you think I'd bother stealing it? Word around the market is this is a top-grade egg from the Shenao elves of the God Owo lands. Only the finest." Against the opposite wall, Ethan's heart hammered. Shenao region. Legendary for magical eggs distilled by master elven artisans. Such treasures never showed up in open stalls, only in the hands of elite hunters or licensed trainers. Yet here were two common thieves, planning to hawk this miracle in the busiest market on the continent. "Brothe, the shorter man murmured. "How much can we get for it?" "Hundreds of thousands at the very least," came the confident reply. Ethan pressed himself into the darkness, mind racing. An elven egg that expensive. Whoever ended up with it would stand to gain, or lose, everything. And right now, he knew exactly where to start if he wanted to learn more, or perhaps claim it for himself. Ethan stared at the endless columns of figures before him and muttered under his breath, "Damn, it doesn't look like I'm going to get rich from this." At the sound of his low curse, the lieutenant's eyes snapped up. He slammed his hand on the desk so hard the papers jumped. His voice cut through the quiet room like a blade. "Shut it, you worthless grasshopper. One more word out of you, and you'll regret it." Ethan froze, heart pounding. He forced his lips shut and could only choke out, as the lieutenant turned back to his paperwork. "Thank you for reading. As the project manager, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please leave a recommendation or add this story to your collection." Chapter 89, Double Kill. What's Scorpion? In the Shenao region, the only scorpion-type spirits there are the claw-tailed scorpion and Scorpio. Ethan slipped into the shadows nearby, listening as the two men debated their quarry. Scorpio wasn't anything rare. It even showed up around Chengdu, so the real prize had to be the claw-tailed scorpion. A slow smile tugged at Ethan's lips. He knew that spirit well. He'd once possessed its egg, only to relinquish it because his qualifications fell short. Yet the claw-tailed scorpion spirit was undeniably potent. When it evolved from a venomous worm type into the legendary Dragon King scorpion, it acquired not just devastating poison, but also a dark alignment. The two attributes complemented each other perfectly. Dark magic shored up the venom type's weaknesses, and venomous attacks compensated for Dark's frailties. The result was a near-invincible creature, vulnerable only to Earth-based attacks, and only doubly so. Every other affinity registered at best a glancing impact. Clenching his fist, Ethan weighed his next move. If those thieves in Shenao truly had that egg, they were courting disaster, one that he was more than ready to unleash. Ethan stared at the holographic readout, his mind racing as he took in every line of data on the Dragon King scorpion. Though its attacks only inflict ordinary damage, it halves the effects of poison, phantom, grass, and dark skills. And thanks to its innate evil system immunity, it stands virtually unchallenged by any spirit from those schools. Combine that with its outstanding racial traits, blistering speed, rock-solid defense, and fierce attack power, and you have the ultimate tank and striker rolled into one. What really set the Dragon King scorpion apart, though, was its versatility. With a combat armor specialization, it excels as a stationary shield bearer, absorbing blows that would shatter lesser warriors. Switch its build to sniper mode, and it transforms into a deadly close-quarters assassin, catching foes off guard with lightning-quick strikes. As a high-output fighter, its hidden talents in sustained damage make it one of the team's most reliable damage dealers. In every role, tank, frontline bruiser, continuous DPS unit, the Dragon King Scorpion performs flawlessly. Ethan couldn't help but compare it to the hottest multiplayer title back on Earth. This beast was the definition of an all-rounder. No matter the challenge, it had the stats, the skills, and the sheer adaptability to carry any team to victory. As he finished reviewing the specs, a grin spread across his face. With the Dragon King Scorpion on his side, Ethan knew he was holding the key to absolute dominance. Ethan narrowed his eyes as he listened to the hushed bargaining. It didn't take long for him to realize that the scorpion-tailed scorpion's elven eggs had been stolen. He just couldn't tell how. Yet even without the details, he knew one thing for sure. These eggs had to be top tier. Otherwise, they'd never reach the black market in Shenao's Golden City. That left only two possibilities. Either the rightful owner hadn't noticed the theft, allowing the thieves to lurk here in safety as they hunted for a quick, lucrative sale, or the eggs were subtly flawed, and the owner, aware of the defect, dared not cry theft, instead resorting to stilted negotiations with Huang Lian. Ethan was convinced the second scenario was more likely. If the eggs were truly pristine, they'd fetch a far higher price in Shenao, where the people of the Kanto region still hadn't fully grasped the value of elven specimens. Even the elves of Astra remained ignorant of how rare and how precious these eggs could be. If the latter were true, then this elven egg's lineage had to be extraordinary, otherwise its owner wouldn't have been so paranoid as to haul it clear out to Kanto to sell. Clearly, some formidable figure in Shenao cast a long shadow over this petty dealer, keeping him too frightened to show his face. Ethan couldn't hide how excited he felt. Not just because his Dragon King Scorpion boasted incredible stats after evolving from the claw-tailed form, but also because of the rare pedigree represented by this egg that had fallen into his hands by pure chance. Meanwhile, the two traders continued their conversation, but their chatter had long since drifted from anything of substance into idle gossip. Ethan eased forward and peered past their shoulders. To his surprise, they weren't watching the alley. They were focused on the street beyond, backs turned. They must have assumed that this dead end offered perfect privacy. Who would think to check here? Ethan had thought the same, until a sliver of moonlight revealed a narrow crack in the wall, barely wide enough to conceal a person. He slipped into the shadowy gap, pressing himself against the rough stone. Hidden at last, he watched and waited. Ethan and his partner chose to keep a low profile. No elven guards flanking the entrance, just a ragtag black market bazaar like any other. With a quiet breath, Ethan slid his hand to the hilt of his elven-forged dagger at his waist. His eyes flicked to Dark Crow, standing a few paces away. At that silent signal, the shadowy phantoms they'd summoned slipped up through the floorboards, materializing around the unsuspecting crowd. Officially, the black market forbids open violence and banned magic, but that rule is purely for show. Every year, countless bodies turn up in back alleys, and as long as you're never caught, no one asks questions. Beneath the flickering lanterns and creaking stalls, pickpockets rub shoulders with smugglers, informants whisper alongside cutthroats, and honesty is a rare commodity. The only scrutiny here is superficial. How far you actually push the envelope depends entirely on your nerve and skill. In the heart of the bazaar, their targets busied themselves over a pile of freshly minted coins. They laughed and debated how to split the windfall, voices loud and carefree. That careless confidence was all Ethan needed. They were utterly off guard, exactly the moment he'd been waiting for. Ghosts, slip past their defenses and hypnotize them. Dumb beasts, take control of their minds. Don't let them hurl the elven orb and raise the alarm. Dark crows, wings forward, attack and kill. Seizing the moment, Ethan flung the elven orb from his belt. It shattered on the slick cobblestones, sending a pulse of emerald light rippling into the air. From its remnants emerged a hulking, horned creature, its muscles quivering with barely contained energy. With a sharp gesture, Ethan barked out his commands, and the beast bared its fangs in ruthless compliance. At the same instant, two ghostly figures drifted from the shadows. Their translucent hands wove through the guards' midsections, yanking limbs into impossible angles and clamping down on their throats with a hypnotic force. The burly men opened their mouths in silent screams, only to find their jaws locked tight. One reached for the orb at his waist, the other fisted the air, searching for any weapon. Neither could move. Then, like bolts of living lightning, two dark crows swooped down the narrow alley. Their wings glowed with a fierce white light as they struck. The first crow shattered a man's ribs against the rough brick wall. The second crashed into the other with equal brutality. Each impact landed with a bone-splintering crack that echoed through the night. Within heartbeats, both guards crumpled, pain and unconsciousness stealing their last breath of resistance. Ethan stepped forward, surveying the aftermath. The alley was deathly still, save for the ragged rise and fall of the dumb beast's chest. Above them, the ghostly sentinels and luminous crows hovered, their task complete. Under Ethan's command, no one would sound the alarm tonight. The instant the blow landed, the incubator holding the elven eggs slipped from their grasp. The beast, Ghost, who had been shadowing them, rolled back, pinned in midair by its own hesitation. Ethan surveyed the two figures crumpled on the ground without a flicker of emotion. From Rocket's utility belt, he drew a slender dagger. The very blade he'd used on Trial Island. They had believed Shunzheng's praying mantis trap would catch him off guard. They never imagined that the supposed loser, Ethan, would appear instead, as sudden and unbidden as a songbird in flight. With a single swipe, he wiped the dagger clean on their tunics, then banished both captives to the path of Yellow Springs. Each had worn twin elven runes at their waists, meant to bind their power. But Ethan had already undone those seals before summoning his elven allies. He'd learned long ago not to underestimate the elves' speed or his enemy's cunning, which was why he kept Ghost concealed in darkness, ever ready to counter any ambush. Ghost's binding magic was potent, sufficient to immobilize foes, so long as they weren't among the most formidable of their kind. Mortal flesh, after all, remained achingly vulnerable against elven might. Ethan gave the order to confiscate their spirit orbs and lock them in secure containment units. No chance for the captured creatures to break free on their own. As he scanned each chip, the figures appeared on his display. The burly man's first captive was an aber monster, orange class, level 25. His second was a big-billed bird, orange class, level 24. The young man with the high-pitched voice carried a Lada, orange class, level 22, and, to Ethan's surprise, a yellow-class supersonic bat at level 18. A yellow-class elf? Ethan raised an eyebrow. Though only level 18, the bat's appraisal value alone outstripped the combined value of the other three creatures. None of these beasts rivaled legendary monsters like the Dark Crow or the Foolish Beast in sheer strength, but confronting all four at once would still be a formidable and highly dangerous prospect. He knew he couldn't hope to win such a fight. More troubling, any commotion here in the black market could seal their fate. Escaping wouldn't be as simple as slipping away in a crowd. Even as a Rockets operative, Ethan understood how tightly these underground dealers ran their business. His team finished sealing the four orbs and slipped them into their pockets. For now, the creatures were contained, yet the tension in the air made it clear that this uneasy truce wouldn't hold for long. Ethan wiped his blade clean and surveyed the two fallen elves at his feet. They'd been nothing special, average quality, average strength, but even so, such creatures fetched a tidy sum on the black market. He looted their pockets and pouches, then grinned in surprise as the tally climbed to 100,000 Union coins. Not bad for paupers, he mused. Thievery really was a lucrative profession. His gaze then fell on a strange incubator suspended by chains from the ceiling. Inside it hovered an elven egg, softly pulsing. Ethan stepped forward, lifted the glass lid, and a data panel materialized before him. Puppet elf, tongue scorpion, light cyan. Gender, male. Level 1 attributes, toxic, insect. Traits, unknown. Equipped items, none. Genetic skills, ruthless strike, high-speed movement, poison tail, hunting instinct, basic skills, bite, poison needle, piercing stare. Teaching ability, none. Skill acquisition, none. He frowned in pleasant surprise. A scorpion-tailed elf, exactly the kind of puppet he'd hoped to find, and its light cyan rank, while the lowest tier in the cyan grade, was still a clear step above the common green. Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. This little scorpion could become a lethal ally once he figured out how to hatch it. Ethan reviewed the 4 genetic specimens before him and felt his excitement mount at the sight of the claw-tailed scorpion elf egg. If he could successfully incubate it and guide its evolution into a Dragon King scorpion, he'd hold a genuine ace in his hand. Although the scorpion's exact abilities were still unknown, his research had shown that each of its 3 latent traits promised a powerful cultivation path. That alone convinced him this was the perfect project. Cultivating an elf from an unhatched egg also guaranteed a special bond. The moment the hatchling emerged, its first sight was its incubator, its parent, and that forged unshakable loyalty. Ethan still shook his head in disbelief that Ben, in a spur-of-the-moment identity swap, had stumbled upon such a high-potential egg. This was Ethan's 3rd elf egg. The first, the giant needlebiter bee elf, he'd sold to Ying, and the second, a gift from Kira, had sadly failed to hatch. But this time, with the claw-tailed scorpion egg in his care, he was determined to succeed. Ethan leaned over the incubator's display, a faint cyan glow bathing his features. The screen confirmed what he'd suspected. This was no ordinary elf's egg. Inside lay a scorpion-tailed elf, the first of its kind to ever hatch in his world. Although Kira's legendary elven egg had captured everyone's attention, it remained stubbornly unviable. This new specimen, by contrast, was primed for life. He studied, e-vitals scrolling across the monitor. All key indices fell well within healthy parameters, and a bold 3 marked the days remaining until the hatch. 3 days, and he would witness history. Tomorrow, no, in exactly 72 hours, this scorpion-tailed elf would break free from its shell. Ethan felt a thrill of anticipation. He'd already begun designing specialized energy cubes through his nanochip system, tailoring their composition to match the hatchling's unique physiology. In days to come, producing its perfect nutritional blocks would be automated and effortless. Yet he reminded himself of one crucial caveat. Newly hatched elves, especially exotic hybrids like this one, couldn't digest energy cubes immediately. Those nutrient-dense blocks were formulated for juveniles whose digestive systems were already in place. A neonate needed a gentler introduction, live fare, soft meats, maybe even diluted elven milk to spark its initial growth. Ethan tapped a sequence on his datapad, opening a new research file. Neonatal feeding protocol, scorpion-tailed elf. He would have to source or synthesize an appropriate starter diet, something both palatable and safe for a fragile newborn elf. Perhaps a blend of purified proteins and trace minerals delivered via a microfeeder tube. He closed the file and exhaled, a slow smile spreading across his face. Kira's egg might remain eternally dormant, but here, in his little laboratory, a new chapter was about to begin. In 3 days, Ethan would welcome the first scorpion-tailed elf into the world, and he was determined that its first meal would give it the best start possible. Ethan decided to bypass the usual channels and head straight for the elf trading district of the black market. His goal was to acquire a high-capacity milk tank, a device that generates fresh, nutrient-dense milk on demand. For juvenile elves, nothing was more nourishing than milk produced directly from one of these tanks, and the higher the tank's level, the purer and richer the milk it yielded. Pre-packaged milk could be bought on the spot, but any variety designed for long-term storage was inevitably diluted with preservatives, sapping its nutritional potency. If he had the chance, Ethan reasoned, it was far better to invest in a top-tier milk tank once and for all. Originally, he'd planned to secure the milk tank after perfecting his method for incubating Kira's elf eggs. With a high-grade tank in hand, he could feed the hatchlings an ultra-nutritious formula, ensuring they matured quickly and with extraordinary strength, practically on the level of demigods. That head start, he knew, would be decisive. But time was pressing. The scorpion eggs he was also incubating were due to hatch in just 3 days. Ethan realized he couldn't afford to wait any longer. The milk tank purchase would have to be accelerated if he wanted to meet his tight deadline. Ethan surveyed his hidden sanctum, now more warehouse than hiding place. Ever since he'd acquired the incubator, he knew his body would mature into something formidable. With that settled, he dispatched the spectral guardians to stow it away in the shadows, no second thoughts. On the shelves lay the freshly captured jawtail scorpion elven eggs, alongside one more prize, Kira's legendary elven egg. In the corner, the half-witted beast cradled the luminous elven orb in its claws, and perched on Ethan's shoulder was the silent black raven, its beady eyes ever watchful. Dark elves were scarce, but winged, malevolent elves still fetched high prices on the black market. Ethan couldn't risk revealing his ties to the raven thieves, so he slipped a human skin mask over his face, one he'd purchased at great cost, and drew a jet-black robe from his spatial belt. With measured steps, he left the remote alley, melting into the night. Behind him lay 6 hyper-realistic masks of human faces, 6 different identities, each primed for a particular scheme. He already had a plan for every role. The most vital of them all was the mask given by Wu Ying, his official persona with, in the Alliance, the one identity he'd kept under the tightest lock and key. Tonight, even that mask would see the light of day. Ethan had originally acquired the human skin mask that Aya was now wearing to advance his secondary vocation, as an elf hunter. In his previous life, he'd made his first real fortune in that role, and the gold he earned allowed him to invest heavily in raising and training his elf companion. While there's an element of chance in every world, Ethan already enjoys a higher starting point here. His elf hunter profession grants him access to even greater resources as he continues to nurture and strengthen his elf. Chapter 91, Elf Hunter. Ethan knew the layout of the black market better than most. Stepping out of the narrow alley, he headed straight for the elf district. In his previous life, as an elf hunter, a fact only a handful of traders were aware of, this was his regular haunt. The moment he entered, he was struck by the cacophony of sounds and the swirl of colors. Costumed performers wove through the crowd alongside merchants hawking trinkets. Lining each shop's entrance were sturdy iron cages, each holding a rare elf, specimens dragged in from distant regions. The elves inside stood listless, their eyes vacant, But that didn't stop eager onlookers from pointing out their strengths and weaknesses, as if inspecting livestock. Ethan recognized several Yusanji elves among them, prized for their innate magical prowess. Though these captives, too, appeared drained of spirit, their prestigious lineage guaranteed a steady stream of interested buyers. The largest vendors offered an impressive variety: warriors skilled in blade and bow, seers with visions of the future, and healers whose hands glowed with restorative power. Outside some shops, assistants stood with outstretched arms, coaxing passersby inside. To an untrained eye, the gestures might have seemed like something else entirely, but Ethan knew better. They were nothing more than marketing tactics in this bustling bazaar. Here, every display was a performance, every captive a commodity, and every transaction a reminder of how far he'd fallen since his days as a hunter. Ethan wove his way through the bustling aisles of the golden black market, pausing at each stall that showcased creatures of every shape and power. Many merchants flaunted rare elves, some with quasi-divine bloodlines, whose wild instincts had been stripped away by harsh training. Though expensive, these tamed prodigies felt like empty shells. No matter how much you paid, you never regained what was lost. Ethan had come today for a very different purpose. He needed a large milk can, only he intended it to be so much more than a container. Most buyers treated elves as mere tools or status symbols, especially assistant wizards in need of a quick shortcut. But Ethan was still an apprentice. He wasn't willing to snap up the first gentle creature he saw. What he craved was an elf with spirit intact, one he could form a genuine bond with and train through trust rather than force. If he found the right candidate, a strong, untamed elf, he promised himself he would dedicate every ounce of effort to shape and nurture it. Failing that, he feared he might be driven to choose one of the market's domesticated stock, using it purely for milk production, a thought that left his conscience uneasy. At the far end of the street, he came to the one shop he knew that refused to tame its merchandise. The iron cages at its entrance were reinforced with thick bars, and the elves inside snarled with primal fury, their blazing eyes fixed on the gathering crowd, and even the bravest onlookers flinched at the raw, unbroken wildness before them. This was the place Ethan had to explore next, hoping, against all odds, to discover an elf worthy of his ambitions. This shop was famous, revered by those who sought to tap into the raw power of elves, but it wasn't the kind of place for someone looking to collect exotic curios or treat elves like playthings. At street level, nothing hinted at what lay inside. No welcoming hostess in revealing garb, no glittering display windows. Just a solid black iron door set into the brick wall. Ethan didn't hesitate. He lifted the heavy handle and pushed. The door protested with a harsh screech of grinding metal. He stepped through. Inside, the air was dank and dim, no neon lights or velvet drapes, only a handful of candles flickering on wrought iron sconces. Along both walls stretched rows of cages, each containing an elf in a state of wild, unbroken fury. Their tangled hair bristled, and their eyes gleamed with terror and rage as they battered the bars and let out feral cries. Unfazed by the cacophony of desperation, Ethan strode down the narrow aisle, his footsteps muffled on the stone floor. 2 minutes later, he reached the back of the shop. Behind a low counter sat a woman clad in form-fitting black leather. With one hand she held a small mirror, and with the other she was calmly applying lipstick, her movements deliberate and precise despite the anguished screams echoing around her. At the sound of his approach, she snapped the mirror shut, capped the lipstick, and lifted her gaze to meet his with cool, unflinching eyes. Ethan stepped up to the counter, and the woman behind it looked up with a mischievous smile. Her eyebrows arched like slender willows, and in the flicker of the candlelight, the faint pink spirals on her crystal-clear cheeks seemed to glow. She propped her chin on one delicate hand and purred, Well, look who wandered in. Is this your first time here, or did someone send you?" Before Ethan could reply, she sniffed the air, her small, upturned nose wrinkling in surprise. "Blood scent? So you really did stumble in by accident. Do you even know our rules?" "I do." Ethan's voice was quiet, slightly rough around the edges. It carried a weight she couldn't place. Most customers never guessed who or what stood behind this shop. But Ethan knew the truth. This supposedly quaint elf emporium was owned and operated by the Hunters Guild, the largest elf hunting organization in the entire Kanto region. Every elf locked in these cages had been captured by guild members, chosen precisely because they remained wild and unbroken. After all, in the eyes of the Hunters Guild, untamed spirits were the most coveted prizes of all. Ethan eyed the woman behind the counter. She looked delicate, too delicate, but he knew better than to judge by appearances. This was the store's manager, a registered elf hunter in the guild whose power was said to rival that of a demi-immortal king. And when she laid out the rules, Ethan listened. Once you buy an elf, the sale is final. No returns, no exchanges, and once you leave, whatever happens is on you. If you break this rule, you'll be blacklisted by every guild-sanctioned elf market in the land, and in extreme cases, guild hunters will be sent to track you down. He nodded, recalling how these elves ended up here. Many had been snatched from alliance-sanctioned reserves. Others had been trafficked through criminal networks or ripped away from rival shadow organizations. If word ever got back to the alliance, or to those darker powers, about an elf's illicit origins, its price would collapse. These were usually minor figures in the grand political game, but each carried a premium tag on its head. Ethan's heart pounded. He'd come to this shop with a purpose, one that would test every rule the guild had ever set. And he was about to see just how far the manager's silent threat would stretch. Rare, high-grade elves never appear in the open market. They're reserved for the Hunter Guild's exclusive auctions. Invitations go out to every registered customer of the guild's storefront, as well as to select VIPs within the region's underworld. In the Guandu territory, the Hunter Guild holds unrivaled influence. Even the powerful League and the notorious Rockets can only keep their power in check. No rival organization comes close, which makes each guild auction a must-attend spectacle for anyone operating off the books. Among those underground players, the Rocket faction stands tallest, and they share a tight bond with the guild. Trainers like Ethan routinely receive trial elves from the Hunter Guild at no cost. These creatures arrive unbroken and untrained, giving the Rockets exclusive first dibs on taming and developing them. It's clear that the Guild and the Rockets are inextricably linked, though the full extent of their cooperation remains shrouded in secrecy. Don't forget to bookmark and spread the word. Chapter 92, Big Milk Tank. Ethan braced himself as the leather-clad woman before him produced a bottle of nail polish from beneath the counter. With a bored tilt of her head, she twisted the cap, applied the color to her own long nails, then casually held a small blower to dry them. She glanced at Ethan, who stood awkwardly, hands dangling at his sides. "Say something," she drawled, tapping her now perfect nails. "What rank of spirit are you looking for? Don't start talking about gods. You can't afford those." Her words weren't empty boasts. As a seasoned elf hunter, she needed nothing more than a quick visual assessment to know where Ethan stood. The dark feathered raven perched on his shoulder gave her all the clues she needed. The bird's plumage shone with healthy vitality, and its aura hinted at solid cultivation, but it lacked the raw power of a top-tier spirit. In short, the raven was reliable, but nowhere near the heights of a quasi-deity. "So," she added, voice cool, "you're not here to buy a god, either." She flicked her nails once more, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Name your price range, and maybe we can do business. Otherwise, you're wasting both our time." Ethan had always admired quasi-divine beasts for their raw power, but the time and effort required to train them to maturity made him hesitate. Even when a creature finally reached its prime, refining its abilities into a battle-ready form was a painstaking, lengthy process. Today, however, he had something simpler in mind. He stepped up to the counter. "I'd like to buy a large milk can," he said plainly. The woman behind the counter, dressed from head to toe in supple black leather, arched an eyebrow. "A large milk can, you say? Wild ones are nearly impossible to come by. Most of the good stock is already claimed by the noble families in Manjin City. Are you sure that's what you want?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, that's exactly what I need." Her eyes narrowed into a challenging gleam, and irritation flickered across her features. "Humph. No courtesy, no preamble. Fine, follow me." With that, she reached into a drawer, pulled out a hefty ring of brass keys, and turned on her heel. The soft creak of her leather attire punctuated each confident step as she strode through the front hall and toward the rear of the shop. Heart-pounding, Ethan followed. He couldn't help but notice the sleek line of her hips and the confident sway of her shoulders, but he forced his gaze downward. This was Thornrose, renowned not just for her exotic beasts, but also for her quasi-celestial martial prowess. He owed her respect and would not allow himself any impure thoughts. They passed rows of cages and barrels stacked with strange ingredients. Every so often, Ethan caught the leather-clad woman glancing back to see if he kept up. Determined to prove his seriousness, he matched her pace without faltering. Behind the last door lay the shop's secret stock. Ethan squared his shoulders, braced himself, and followed Thornrose into the shadows beyond, ready to make his purchase. Ethan realized the woman's gaze had already drifted away. He offered a faint smile in return. No matter who she was, her eyes always burned with fierce determination. But this time, it was the figure behind her that intrigued him most. They stopped before a solid gray iron door. The leather-clad woman produced an enormous keyring, fingering each key with practiced care until she found the right one. She inserted it into a lock at the foot of the door and turned twice. With a low groan, the thick iron plate swung open. "Here it is. The big milk tank you asked for. Have a look and see if it suits you. Each cage has its price tag on it. Just let me know which one you want." She turned on her heel, humming a soft tune as she strode away, the heavy keychain jingling at her side. Ethan watched her retreat until she slipped around the corner. He'd admit it, standing face to face with such a formidable woman had made him nervous. Now, though, he forced himself to focus on the row of enclosures before him. In the small, dim, lit room stood 5 iron cages, each containing one of the legendary big milk tanks he had come to evaluate. Ethan tapped the chip's interface and activated its full scan. Instantly, the data profiles for all 5 big milk tanks sprang to life on his display. By the numbers, each creature fell well within the acceptable parameters, ripe for whatever plan he had in mind. Visually, 4 of them looked healthy and alert, though their eyes still flickered with fear and restrained contempt. The 5th, noticeably older, bore the worn features of a long life, but showed no sign of breaking its mild temperament. None had ever tried to scream or batter at their cages. Despite their generally docile natures, none had forgiven the hunters who'd captured and confined them. Ethan had already eliminated the eldest milk tank and the highest-ranked specimen. The latter had reached level 30 and proved the most aggressive. The 3 that remained now hovered around level 20. Their open hatred held no power over him. He'd subdued them. He had no interest in earning their trust or cultivating their ragged grudges. With a quiet shrug, Ethan moved on to the next task. It was clear that when this big milk tank was first captured, it had suffered a massive shock, so great that it remained fiercely hostile toward humans. Elves like that are notoriously difficult, if not impossible, to tame, so Ethan abandoned the idea, despite its high level. Besides, once an elf reaches a certain rank, its combat style is already deeply ingrained and nearly impossible to retrain. That left 3 other big milk tank candidates, all light green tier around level 20, quite respectable. One even boasted the Guts trait, which would tailor its battle tactics specifically against ghost-type foes. Ethan passed on it too. Although Guts would have made it a solid fighter, he already had plenty of offensive power on his team. The Dark Crow and the soon-to-be-captured Scorpion were both top-tier damage dealers, so he didn't need another brute. Clearly, Ethan was looking instead for a big milk tank that could serve as a support elf for his party. After completing his cultivation, the sturdy tank now has enough resilience to keep the elves fighting and recovering their strength in time. That leaves Ethan with 2 surviving options for his frontline guardian. He can only choose one, and both bring unique advantages. The thick fat specialization, for example, cuts incoming fire and ice damage in half, an ability that dramatically boosts the elves' chances of survival in battle. Here are the specifications for the 2 remaining Miltank in Ethan's stable. Miltank number 1, light green. This female Miltank is at level 21 and of the standard normal type, with the thick fat nature. She isn't holding any item. Her inherited genetic abilities are Curse and Assist. Her repertoire of basic moves includes tackle, leer, defense curl, stomp, milk drink, endure, and rollout. Under instruction, she has also learned shockwave and thunder punch, electrical techniques that give her a strong edge in direct combat. Miltank number 2, light green. The second female Miltank is level 20, also normal type with the thick fat nature, and carries no held item. Her genetic skills are present and holdback, focusing on more supportive effects. She knows the same core set of basic moves: tackle, leer, defense curl, stomp, milk drink, endure, rollout, but her taught moves, assist, heal bell, and block, make her a natural at backstage support and battlefield control. In practice, these two Miltank couldn't be more different. The first is offensively oriented, leaning heavily on electric attacks for hits. The second excels at utility and team support, thanks to its healing and status control techniques. Looking ahead to Ethan's roster, neither one emerges as an ideal all-purpose choice. He'll need to decide whether raw power or reliable backup better suits his strategy. For Ethan, the second large milk tank was the perfect choice today, and it left him feeling more satisfied than ever. If you enjoyed his chapter, please share and recommend it. Chapter 93, Hunter's Guild. Ethan stared at the row of massive cages, his eyes fixed on a single label. He'd come to the Hunter's Guild intending to buy just one creature, a big milk tank, so he could supply nourishing milk to the elves in his party and brace them for the upcoming battle against the desert scorpions. Despite the curious glances from other guild members eyeing the beasts, he ignored them and studied the details. Cage number 85679, genus, big milk tank tier, advanced training potential, medium, price, 500,000 union coins, 500,000 coins. Aside from the elite milk tanks priced at 600,000, this was the priciest specimen in the haul. Still, considering its advanced qualification and solid skill set, Ethan judged the cost fair, if a bit steep. He reminded himself how, back on Trial Island, he'd traded just 20,000 merit points for a green-tier unicorn. Of course, mounts like milk tanks were far more valuable than ordinary needlebees, and the coin-to-point exchange rates were hardly fixed. He squared his shoulders and, with a decisive nod, pressed the red purchase button mounted by the cage's entrance. Folding his arms, he waited calmly for the handlers to release his new companion. Ethan waited in the softly lit aisle, running a finger along the smooth surface of the large milk can he'd chosen. A moment later, the shop's door slid open, and a tall woman in a black leather coat strode in. Her boots clicked sharply on the metal floor as she approached, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "That was fast," she greeted, tilting her head. "Which one did you pick?" Ethan lifted the milk can. "This, and here's my bank card." He slid a matte black card across the counter toward her. She arched an eyebrow as she took it. An anonymous account, of course. Good eye. From a recessed panel in her console, she produced a compact card reader. With swift precision, she tapped in numbers and slid the card through. A soft beep confirmed the transaction, and the display blinked. 500,000 union coins. Next, Rose, as the name tag on her coat revealed, retrieved one of the store's elf orbs, a common scanning device. A crimson glow flared around its rim. Gently, she fitted the milk can inside, and the orb hummed, cataloging the purchase. When it finished, the orb clicked open. "Your items," Rose said, returning both the orb and Ethan's bank card. Her voice dropped into a teasing drawl on the name Rose. "I hope you come back soon." The last note of her greeting lingered in the air. Ethan felt a light flutter in his chest. Perhaps it was excitement, or maybe the aftershock of spending 500,000 union coins on a single can. Either way, he found himself nodding before stepping away, the leather-coated clerk's parting words echoing in his mind. Ethan had seen it all before. A dazzling songbird whose beauty and charm lured men into doing reckless things. But he knew the truth about Chiang Changwei. Her name fit her like a glove. She was a rose bristling with thorns. Anyone who got too close wouldn't just feel a prick, they'd be impaled. Even the strongest fighters from the Junqian League had learned why her petals ran so red. Her sweetness? A lure. No one ever truly won her. Ethan pocketed the bank card and the elf orb she'd handed him. He hesitated a moment, then met her gaze. "I want to register with the Hunters Association," he said evenly, "and pick up a few contracts." Chiang Changwei froze, lipstick halfway to her lips. The coy smile slipped away as if she were seeing him for the first time. She let her eyes travel slowly from his boots to his chin, then whispered, "A hunter?" He nodded. The Hunter's Boat Guild operated in the shadows, its loyalty as fleeting as a whisper, and Ethan knew he was about to step into its tangled web. Except for the handful of guild members groomed from childhood, most people joined simply by registering and completing the occasional commission, without any real obligations. As a result, guild members are scattered throughout the realm, each region maintaining a branch office. Those locals ops trade in wild spirits, serve as contact points for hunters, and issue elf hunting permits. Ethan's first brush with the elf hunter profession came in Golden City's branch back in his previous life. The manager then wasn't Rose, but the routine was the same. Officially registering as a guild hunter is little more than a formality. After all, even unregistered hunters can turn in their elf trophies and collect payment from the guild. But once you hold the hunter's license, you gain access to special directives and higher-tier assignments that aren't available to the general public. In his past life, Ethan earned his very first fortune by hunting elves. Now that he's been reborn in this world, he has no intention of letting the chance slip away. Provided he proves his strength and discernment, there's no faster path to wealth and reputation than becoming an elf hunter. Ethan wasn't exactly short of money right now, but he knew that as his elf levels climbed, the cost of necessary resources would skyrocket. This trip was simply a bit of advanced preparation. He offered Rose a silent nod. She shot him a dismissive glance, then went back to applying her lipstick. When she was done, she jabbed a finger at him and sneered, "I thought you were some newbie. Turns out you're just another hunter. How boring." Without another word, she led him out of the small chamber and deeper into the building. For nearly 5 minutes they walked in complete silence, until at last they came to a massive iron door. Rose pushed it open and revealed a vast, well-lit hall. Gone was the dank gloom they'd left behind. Instead, golden chandeliers cast a warm glow across marble floors and ornate columns. Hundreds of people moved through the space, each wearing a medal on their chest. Some carried 1 star, others 3, and a few bore a blazing sun emblem. At the center of the room stood a lone figure with that sun medal, and every onlooker regarded him with awed fear. Clearly, he was the hall's most formidable warrior. Along the chamber's perimeter, several teleportation portals shimmered softly, ready to whisk anyone away at a moment's notice. Within moments, the teleportation portals would activate. A handful of registered hunters hurried toward the shimmering gateways and vanished into the hall beyond. This Reliant Hall system is the official mode of travel for guild members, elf magic anchoring fixed teleport nodes at specific locations. However, these nodes remain hidden until a hunter completes the requisite registration and at least 1 qualifying mission. For instance, once you register as an elf hunter, you gain access to just 3 of the many portals scattered throughout the hall. In this central hub, every teleport point lies within a 3-kilometer radius, allowing fast transport to neighboring regions. Each hunter's rank is proudly displayed by a medal pinned to their chest. 1 star denotes a novice, 2 stars an experienced adventurer, and so on up to the coveted 7-star designation. The higher your star level, the more challenging and rewarding the missions you're eligible to accept. 7-star status represents the pinnacle of achievement within the guild, a distinction held by only the most elite hunters. The figure who glanced up at the sun moments ago was one such guild member, seamlessly blending into the steady stream of teleporting hunters. I'm happy to help polish and rewrite the chapter, but I'll need the full text to do so. Please paste the entire chapter here, and I'll transform it into fluent, idiomatic English, renaming Aoki to Ethan as requested and ensuring he's portrayed as male. Once I have the complete passage, I'll craft a smooth, natural version ready for an English-speaking audience. Chapter 94, Sundog. In the Hunters Guild hierarchy, ordinary star hunters simply accept missions and sell off enchanted artifacts, free agents with no lasting obligations. But those who hold the coveted Sun Medal, the honorary Sun Elders, enjoy VIP privileges and a guaranteed stipend at a price. The guild may summon them at will to fight its battles, and among rank-and-file hunters, they're mockingly dubbed Sun Dogs, the Sun Medal's running dogs. Yet derision fades when you see their power. Every sun metal bearer ranks at least as strong as a quasi-sky king. As Captain Qian Chiang escorted Ethan into the great hall, idle chatter stilled and dozens of heads turned. Moments later, conversation drifted back to normal, proof that life in the guild never pauses. By a wide window, a cold-faced sun metal holder lounged on a velvet sofa. The instant Rose appeared at the doorway, his expression brightened, and he rose with a sunny smile. "Rose," he greeted, stepping forward. "I didn't expect to see you here." Rose met his tone with a distant frown. The playful warmth she'd displayed in the shop was gone, replaced by an icy reserve that put 10 feet of space between them, even as they stood side by side. Rose stood just inside the guild hall's entrance, arms crossed and lips pressed into a thin line. "What are you doing here again, Yangdu? You show up everywhere I go." Yangdu, his badge gleaming like a miniature sun, only chuckled. "I heard you've been reassigned here as the store manager. Well, that settles it. I'll file my transfer request right away." This was not the first time in recent days that Yangdu had turned up on her doorstep, and Rose was at her wit's end. His background was anything but ordinary, yet he insisted on following her from post to post. Still, she refused to dignify him with a reply. Ignoring his eager grin, she stepped directly to the registration counter. Behind her, Ethan fell into step, silent and observant. Yangdu gave up on coaxing a reaction from Rose. He strolled over to the clerk at her side. "Please begin the new member's registration," Rose instructed the staff without looking back, then drifted aside and left the counter to Ethan. Only then did Yangdu finally notice the young man standing behind Rose. His easy smile vanished, replaced by a sharp frown. "And who is this?" he asked, voice low and curious. Ethan stood in line at the Hunter Guild's mission hall, barely registering the bustling activity around him. Ahead of him, Chi Changwei ignored everyone. She'd produced a small mirror and methodically reapplied her lipstick in even strokes. Unfazed, Ethan turned to the registration clerk at the counter. "I'd like to sign up as a hunter," he said calmly. Puyang Do, perched nearby, watched Ethan with growing irritation. He'd long admired Chi Changwei. She was a quasi-Sky King-level talent who always seemed to brush him off. Yet here was Ethan, a complete newcomer, showing precisely the same cool indifference. A cold flame of resentment flickered in Puyang's chest. Before he realized what he was doing, he slammed a fist on the counter. "Hey, who do you think you are?" he barked. Ethan didn't flinch. He simply shifted his gaze back to the clerk, as if Puyang's outburst were nothing more than background noise. Only then did a shadow of frustration cross his face. An aftershock from the chaos Rose had unleashed on him earlier. But this was the Hunter Guild's domain. Its rules protected every registrant, regardless of rank or reputation. With that quiet confidence, Ethan refocused on the clerk, certain that nothing here could stand in his way. As soon as he stepped away, that clumsy beast's sudden lunge would have left Yangdu chasing shadows, especially since Ethan was still wearing his human skin mask. "Yangdu, that's enough. Don't harass people, and don't sully the guild's reputation," Rose snapped, noticing the curious glances drifting toward them. If word got out that one of their hunters was roughing up an applicant, it would be a scandal. Yangdu seemed to realize for the first time that he'd almost turned Ethan into a punching bag. He squared his shoulders and let out a roar. "What are you looking at? Mind your own business." The onlookers scattered at his shout, but Yangdu didn't press the attack. Instead, he fixed Ethan with a cold, hard stare, leaned in and murmured so only the three of them could hear. "Boy, I remember you." With that, he turned, reclaimed the sofa he'd been lounging on, closed his eyes, and began to calm himself. Silence fell over the registration hall, until the clerk behind the window cleared her throat. Excuse me, are you here to register as an elf hunter?" she asked quietly. Ethan kept his head bowed until Yangdu stormed out of the meeting room. He knew all about Chan Changwei and Yangdu's reputations. He had no intention of speaking up in the man's presence. Only after Yangdu had left did he dare to lean toward the desk clerk and whisper his confirmation. The clerk exhaled in relief when Ethan gave a firm nod. He knew better than to provoke someone bold enough to defy Yangdu outright. Instantly, his previously slack posture stiffened into professional diligence. In reality, the clerk began as he rifled through a stack of forms, A low star rating at the Hunters Association doesn't buy you much, but once your stars climb, the perks kick in. You'll unlock high star missions. Those come with the best rewards, and you also get discounts when purchasing elves. Those savings alone can make a big difference. He paused to eye Ethan's expression, making sure the young man understood. Ethan nodded again, intrigued by the potential. "All right," the clerk said, sliding a fresh registration card across the counter. "What's your registration code?" He tapped a pen against the desk, ready to finalize the paperwork. Hunters rarely use their real names, so this code would be Ethan's new calling card in the field. Ethan stepped up to the counter at the Elven Hunters Guild headquarters, his heart pounding. Elven hunters weren't a respectable profession. In fact, the Alliance regarded them as little more than outlaws. Nonetheless, many hunters maintained secret ties to the Alliance, operating under code names to keep their identities hidden. The clerk behind the desk didn't look up as he tapped at a hollow screen. "Code name?" he asked, without inflection. Ethan swallowed and replied, "Joker." The name had stuck with him even before his rebirth, and he saw no reason to change it now. The clerk merely nodded and typed the word into the system. A few clicks later, the officer pressed enter, and a slim card slid out of a slot. "This is your Hunter ID," the clerk said, sliding a translucent emerald badge across the desk. "It logs every mission you undertake, tracks your success rate, and stores your guild points. You'll need it every time you accept an assignment." Ethan picked up the card, feeling its smooth, cool surface. Holding his new Hunter ID in his palm, he straightened, steeling himself for what lay ahead. Registered at last with the Elven Hunters Guild, codenamed Joker, he faced his first day with a clean slate and a 0-star rating. Ethan stood and tucked the registration forms into his folder. "All set? Then I'll be on my way." Rose, who had been quietly painting her nails beside him, didn't bother to look up. She slipped from her seat, paused at the door, and called back without turning around. "Be careful around Yang Do. He's not someone to take lightly." They were strangers. Rose had inadvertently set the whole thing in motion, and now this warning was as much help as she could offer. Ethan nodded wordlessly, pocketing her advice, and watched her fade down the hallway in silence. Chapter 95, I Remember You. Ethan strode across the bustling Hunters Guild hall toward a row of sleek terminals. This was where the guild released its contracts. Any hunter could simply tap their ID card and claim an assignment. Every station was occupied, until, by sheer luck, one hunter rose and walked away without reclaiming his card. Ethan slid into the empty chair, inserted his freshly issued ID into the reader, and watched the screen flash to life. Name, Joker Hunter Points 0, Class Novice. Completion rate 0%. Note you're brand new. What are you waiting for? Go hunt some elves. He couldn't suppress a wry smile at the guild's cheeky encouragement. With a click, he opened the quest menu and was greeted by tens of thousands of novice missions. As a freshly registered hunter, only these low-tier contracts were available to him. Contract missions, often called sporadic tasks, are generally straightforward but yield modest rewards. To qualify for higher star assignments and more lucrative payouts, a hunter must level up by earning hunter points, which are awarded based on the total value of captured creatures. For example, submitting an elf corp valued at 100,000 union coins grants 100,000 hunter points. The guild's star ratings scale with cumulative points: 1 star at 100,000 points, 2 stars at 500,000 points, 3 stars at 1.5 million points, 4 stars at 5 million points. Each additional star is progressively harder to achieve, but higher star hunters gain access to far richer contracts. In the Hunters Guild, points function like alliance coins. Upon turning in a task, you receive the corresponding union coin reward plus the same amount in points. These points can then be exchanged directly at the guild for spirits or items of equal value. Ethan's primary motivation for registering with the Hunter Guild as an elven hunter was simple. Elves were incredibly profitable bounties. Year after year, the guild's coffers swelled from elven captures, so much so that adding another elven hunter wouldn't dent their bottom line. In fact, alongside the Elven League and the Rockets, the Hunter Guild ranked among the most lucrative organizations in the realm. He reminded himself, too, that a hunter's star rating didn't always mirror true ability. Sometimes sheer luck could propel you an extra star or two. Ethan studied the quest board carefully. Dozens of miscellaneous commissions were posted, but he hadn't forgotten about his own shadowy errands. To make the most of his time, he decided to combine both objectives by hunting elves along his secret routes. Finally, he zeroed in on one of the more challenging freelance jobs. Miscellaneous commission. Capture a Nidolan of medium qualification or higher. Rewards increase with qualification level. Ethan recalled that in the grasslands outside Manjin City, a few subordinate Nido kings roamed. If he searched methodically, he should be able to find a medium-grade Nidolan and claim a handsome reward to boot. Ethan figured the extra commission would help cover the mounting costs of training his elves. No matter that he already had over 1 million Alliance coins, those funds would vanish fast once he started leveling them up. He clicked to accept the quest, watched it disappear from the available list, then reappear under his profile as a new active mission. Capture Nidoran. In progress. Satisfied, he logged off and returned his access card. The moment Ethan stepped away from the terminal, the figure waiting behind him sat up and scanned the updated task details. Hagi reached up and tugged the hood over his head, then watched as Ethan smoothed down his tunic and strode toward the teleportation hall. As Ethan turned to leave, a prickling awareness told him he wasn't alone. He didn't need to look back to recognize the gaze fixed on him. Pu Yangdo had been dozing on the sofa, eyes shut, but as Ethan passed, he opened them. A faint light flickered in the corner of his eye, tracking which teleportation array Ethan intended to use. Ethan strode purposefully down the corridor until he reached the teleportation chamber. 3 platforms stood in a row. He paused before the central one, then swiped his hunter's ID card across the reader. Pale blue runes flickered to life around the platform's rim, and a soft hum filled the air. At once, Yangdo rose from his seat. He watched Ethan's selection with narrowed eyes, lips curling into a cold smile. For years he'd yearned for Rose's affection, only to be met with indifference. Seeing Ethan, an interloper who dared brush past him, stirred up all the resentment Yangdo had kept bottled inside. Finally, here was an excuse for bloodshed, a perfect outlet for his anger. Nearby, the older hunters of the guild exchanged glances full of sympathy for Ethan. Though he carried no rank badge to mark his prowess, the black-feathered crow perched on his shoulder told its own story. Ethan was no ordinary novice. Still, against a powerhouse like Yangdu, himself on the cusp of ascension, Ethan would have little hope of defense. And no matter the robes he wore, hunters possess uncanny tracking methods. Yangdu wouldn't need to follow Ethan by sight alone. Once he surfaced again, the guild knew the hunt would begin in earnest. In the hall of the Hunters Guild, a sudden flash of white light marked Ethan's departure. Yangdu couldn't suppress a slow, knowing smile as he stepped onto the very same teleportation circle Ethan had just vacated. He swiped his Gold Hunter's badge over the card reader, and the array flared to life around him. Far away, Ethan materialized inside the hollow of a great oak, one of the guild's hidden exit points. Their teleportation arrays are scattered through forests all over the realm. The higher your rank, the more arrays you can access, and the farther you can travel. As a rank 0 hunter, Ethan's only destination was this small wood on the outskirts of Golden City. To foil any trackers from the Alliance, the guild routinely shifts these forest drop-offs, but rarely in such quick succession, so Yangdu planned to follow Ethan through the same portal a moment later. "Come on, you idiot," Ethan called as he stepped out of the tree. He unlatched the cage slung at his side and released his dumb beast. But before the creature had fully cleared the trunk, the hollow burst into that familiar white light once more. From the glow, a tall figure began to emerge, stepping slowly into the clearing. Chapter 12, Rematch at Dawn. Ethan stood his ground, never taking his eyes off Yangdo as he swaggered forward with a sneer. "Well, look who's still hanging around," Yangdo taunted. "Move aside, you idiot, or I'll knock you out of my way." A slow, confident smile curved Ethan's lips. He turned to the massive Pokémon by his side. In an instant, its aura flared, warping the air around it as it shifted into its super form. "Haluga, let's go! Jet flames now!" Ethan's voice was calm but carried an unmistakable edge of steel. For a brief moment, Yangdo's mocking grin faltered. He reached for a Pokeball at his hip, flicked it open, and released his own partner. "I remember your battles, Ethan," he called. "This time, I won't underestimate you." Ethan met his rival's gaze, his tone low and hoarse from countless encounters. "Then show me what you've got." A tense silence fell, broken only by the crackle of Haluga's charged flames and the faint click of Yangdo's Pokeball snapping shut. The dawnlight caught the two challengers, old rivals ready once more to test their strength and resolve. Chapter 96, Nazi Yangdu, hailed by many as a near-immortal king, and Heligar, whose power was nothing short of overwhelming, prepared to strike. Before Heligar's hulking beast could complete its blink step, the dragon-like lord unleashed a torrent of molten flame from his jaws, aiming directly at Ethan and the summoned creatures by his side. Dark crows, ghosts, hold them. Ethan had predicted the very moment of attack. His phantom crows and wraith-like ghosts, summoned in advance, coalesced into a pale green energy barrier that absorbed the brunt of the scorching inferno. Helugar's might was immense. His binding spell should have held for 2 seconds, but under Ethan's relentless assault, it shattered after only half a second. Still, that fleeting instant was enough. The beast's blink step activated, and Ethan and his elven allies vanished into the thick of the forest. With the barrier gone, Helugar's jet flame tore into the underbrush behind them. A thunderous explosion, boom, rippled through the clearing as massive trees burst into flame and ash. "Damn it!" Yangdo howled, staring at the empty forest paths where Ethan had disappeared. Even the roast duck he'd been clutching was swept up by the heat currents, its frantic flapping mocking him as it soared away. Ethan had escaped, leaving only smoldering ruin, and Yangdo's fury in his wake. It was tragic to see the innocent forest elves twisted into undead souls by Heligali's dark power. Once Shun had vented her fury, Yangdo, hands trembling, snatched Heligali away and vanished into the woods. Only then did the distant wail of sirens grow loud enough to reach them, as squads of Golden City police finally streamed into the clearing. Their commander was the infamous Miss Junsha, her cold gaze sweeping over the corrupted elves without a shred of mercy. High above the heart of Golden City, in a spacious chamber lined with porcelain dolls, a woman floated cross-legged in midair. Her hair was the deep green of forest shadows, and her crimson robes trailed around her like spilled wine. This was Nazi, owner of the Golden Pavilion and one of Team Rocket's 3 celebrated chieftains, though few dared speak her name aloud. Suddenly her eyes snapped open, gleaming with an eerie pale light. She whispered, more to herself than to anyone else, "That sensation." Meanwhile, in a darkened corner of the black market, Ethan and the dark ravens reappeared in a flicker of motion. The Doguju creatures had used their instant move ability to deliver them exactly where Ethan had pre-recorded as a fallback point, intended originally for emergencies, but now proving its worth in full. Together, they pressed forward into the shadows, ready for whatever came next. Ethan nodded approvingly and reached out to pat Darkcrow's flank. "Well done, dummy. Your instant movement's getting sharper every time." Darkcrow let out a happy squeal, eyes half closed in contentment. The blink step distance was still short, so its energy drain remained minimal. At Ethan's current strength, he wouldn't stand a chance against someone like Yangdu, but thanks to Darkcrow's teleportation, this hidden training ground stayed invisible to anyone lacking sufficient power. Suddenly, Darkcrow, who had been basking in praise, froze. Its relaxed posture snapped rigid, and a shiver ran down its spine. Ethan's senses flared. He'd never seen his companion react like this. The beast looked as if it had just spotted a natural predator. "What is it, boy?" Ethan's voice dropped to a tense whisper. Darkcrow couldn't answer. It trembled violently, crouching low, feathers bristling. Clearly desperate to flee, yet its body refused to obey. Ethan barely had time to catch his breath before the swirling purple mist around the ghost began to dissipate in frantic wisps. The spirit seemed desperate to slip back into the shadows, only to find itself trapped in the lingering glow of ethereal light. A crisp, amused voice cut through the air, though its source was nowhere to be seen. "Isn't this little creature entertaining?" Ethan whipped around, eyes scanning the empty space. "Show yourself," he snarled. At first, there was only silence. Then, out of the gloom, a figure materialized, floating effortlessly in midair. A young woman, her lips curved into a playful smile, hovered above the scene. Her eyes shone with fascination as she regarded the struggling spirit below. Recognition hit Ethan like a bolt of lightning. His heart pounded as he recalled the name he dared not speak aloud. Narration. Once the third pillar of the Golden Power Hall, she was known throughout the superpowered world as the Superpower Queen. It was she who had sensed the beast's teleportation aura and struck in an instant, rendering the creature trembling, sapping the Dark Crow's strength, and causing the ghost to evaporate. Beneath her serene smile lay a power so formidable that even legends whispered her name in awe. Narration. Ethan stood by his creature's side as the man called Nazi floated toward them, his presence crackling with king-class power. Without so much as glancing at Ethan, Nazi hovered over the beast, his blood-red robes billowing around him like living flame. A teasing smile curved his lips as he looked down at the creature and said, "Well, little one, isn't it about time you found a new master?" The beast's massive body froze, every hair on its neck bristling under the weight of Nazi's aura. Ethan tensed, fearing his companion might break. But the creature met Nazi's gaze with stubborn defiance, fear in its eyes, yet an even fiercer loyalty glinting beneath. With a low, throaty growl, it spat out two sharp syllables, "Never." Nazi's playful expression snapped away. Green energy began to coil around his outstretched hands, brightening with each heartbeat. He drifted lower, the air itself trembling at his sheer force. For the first time, he faced such open resistance from what everyone called a dumb beast. The creature's growl swelled into a clear, resonant roar as it braced itself against the assault of power. Muscles rippling, it lifted its head defiantly and bellowed again, voice steady and unwavering in the howling wind. "Never! I belong to Ethan!" Nazi stared at the beast for a long, charged moment. Then at last, he lifted an eyebrow and let the green energy fade. The robes around him stilled. Without another word, he turned and rose higher, retreating back into the sky, leaving Ethan and his companion standing side by side, bound by a loyalty no force, superpowered or otherwise, could break. Master Nazi's icy tone finally drew her gaze to the slumped figure at Ethan's side. "You're his trainer?" she asked, her voice as cold as steel. Ethan felt the chill of her stare like a dagger pressing against his chest. He straightened, clearing his throat. "Master Nazi, this creature is my companion," he said, reluctant but determined. "Do you recognize me?" Although Master Nazi was renowned throughout Golden City, few had ever laid eyes on the ascetic who had spent years honing her skills at the Taoist temple. With a deliberate motion, Ethan tugged back his black cloak to reveal the crimson and gold rocket's uniform beneath. Suspicion flickered across Nazi's expression, but she remained impassive. Then Ethan unfastened a medallion shaped like a swirling black cloud from his belt, the emblem of a Shadow League reserve member. At that, her eyes widened ever so slightly. "What's your connection to the Shadow League?" Master Nazi asked, her tone thawing just a fraction. She leaned forward, curiosity tempered by caution, as the faintest trace of respect glimmered in her eyes. Chapter 97. Awakening. Ethan stood at attention as the towering figure of Nazi hovered above him, her emerald aura pulsing faintly. "My team is carrying out Lord Ying's orders," he said evenly. He knew that even someone as formidable as Nazi would struggle to resist those commands, especially in her current state. This show of deference wasn't cowardice, but genuine respect for true power. At Ethan's words, Nazi fell silent. The green glow in her eyes and around her hands dimmed, the playful spark draining away. After a pregnant pause, she spoke, her voice low and clipped. "So the shadow agent botched his last mission and came back half destroyed, huh? And you, this weak boy, were supposed to patch him up and keep him alive?" Ethan felt the weight of her gaze but did not flinch. He refused to betray any sign of fear. With a single fluid motion, Nazi dropped from the air and landed before him. Instinctively, Ethan bowed his head in respect. She let out a soft snort of scorn, lips curling into a mocking smile. "Boring," she drawled. "I was expecting something more exciting." Her eyes glinted as she took him in. "But perhaps you'll prove to be an interesting little toy after all." She tilted her head and crossed her arms, striking an almost childlike pose, an oddly familiar mixture of tempestuous youth and raw, unbridled strength. Ethan met her gaze steadily, knowing full well that beneath that capricious exterior lay a warrior of terrifying power. Nazi bounded over to Ethan in quick, springy steps. She tilted her head, appraising him from head to toe, and then broke into a wide smile. "All right," she said. "I'll grant you the shadow seal. Let me ask you again, you stubborn beast. If you swear to follow me, I'll reward you. How does that sound?" Ethan said nothing, and Nazi didn't wait for an answer. "Perfect," she chirped, then crouched so she was eye level with him. "Here's another chance. Walk by my side. You've only scratched the surface of your talent. With your old master, you'd never break free of your limits. But with me, your strength will skyrocket. Deal?" Her tone was almost like an indulgent older sister dangling candy in front of a child's nose. For a moment, Ethan's heart fluttered. Beastly potential? Growth on a faster track? It all sounded tempting, but he simply shook his head. At once, a soft blue glow flickered in Ethan's eyes. Simultaneously, green light shimmered in Nazi's. Without another word, the two superpowered users began their ECG induction link, the air between them humming with latent energy. Ethan had no idea what the creature and Nazi were whispering back and forth, but after several long, silent moments, she suddenly stood up, her lips pushed into a pout. She turned on Ethan with a flash of jealousy, exactly as if someone had snatched her favorite toy away. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. He dared not so much as twitch, watching her carefully. From the dumb beast's vacant stare, he could tell it had sided against her. "You got lucky," Nazi said at last, her tone thick with mockery. "But don't think this idiot is as weak as you expect. It's surprisingly strong. Still, I understand now." She smoothed her expression, the jealousy vanishing in an instant. It had been nothing but a performance. With a dismissive sniff, she turned on her heel and began to walk away, muttering under her breath, "What a disappointment. Guess it's time to find some new playthings. Later." Ethan let out a quiet sigh of relief once she'd almost reached the exit. Thank goodness invoking Ying's name had carried weight. Otherwise, with her mercurial mood, he was sure she wouldn't have let him off so easily. Just as he started to relax, Nazi's head whipped back around. A wicked smile curved at the corner of her mouth. "Ha! That was too easy!" A swirl of green energy gathered around Queen Nazi's hands. When her minions, the mindless brutes and the dark crow, failed to stop her, she thrust a single palm into Ethan's chest. He felt a burning surge rip through him. The blow didn't seem overwhelmingly powerful, yet it sent him flying off his feet. He crashed onto the ground hard. The brutes and the dark crow tried to rise, but their bodies wouldn't obey. Even though the dark crow was an immortal spirit normally immune to such attacks, Queen Nazi had countermeasures for every kind of supernatural foe. Now the spirit lay helpless at her feet. Queen Nazi clapped her hands in satisfaction. She'd only needed to paralyze Ethan for half a day, enough to vent her frustrations and send a clear message. She tilted her head, certain of her victory. Then something unexpected happened. A faint blue glow began to flicker across Ethan's prone form. Queen Nazi's smug smile faltered as she watched the strange, ethereal light spread. What power was this? Nazi's eyes went wide as she recognized the unmistakable ripple in the air around Ethan. It was the sign she knew so well, a newly awakened superpower. Without a second thought, she swooped to his side, blinking rapidly to make sure she wasn't imagining things. Did he just awaken? Her extraordinary senses flared to life as she closed her eyes and tuned into her own superpower perception. When she opened them again, the pale blue aura dancing over Ethan's skin confirmed it. "Incredible," she murmured. "He's one of the lucky ones. His mental capacity is 5 times that of an average person, more than enough to meet the awakening threshold. And yet, to trigger it with just one blow?" Nazi shook her head, still speechless. "I only meant to teach him a little lesson, not kickstart his entire power." She paused, assessing the young man before her. His raw talent might be only average, his ceiling modest, but now that he had a gift, any gift, there was potential. With hard work and training, Ethan could grow strong enough to hold his own among superhumans. Ethan was one of the rare few in the elven world to awaken a true superpower, one of the realm's 3 great abilities. Among hundreds of thousands, only a handful ever achieved this gift. To even qualify for awakening, your innate spiritual energy must outstrip an ordinary elf's by at least 5-fold. By all rights, Ethan should never have made the cut. His previous lifetime in the Third Age gave him some edge in spirit force, yet not enough to complete the leap on his own. It was only when an enemy's stray psychic assault, launched unwittingly by a superpowered operative named Nazi, struck him full force that the dormant spark within Ethan finally ignited. The external influx of power shattered his old limits, and in that moment he broke through, claiming his place among the elven world's special ability elite. Superpowered elves form a tiny minority in this world, and unspoken rules bind them together. Whenever one of their number finds themselves in need, so long as circumstances allow, they rally to each other's side. It's the only way for gifted individuals to survive and thrive amid the intrigues of elfkind. Long ago, before the Elven Alliance even existed, the High Elf Kingdom stood as a true superpower nation. Virtually every citizen, no matter their rank or birthright, wielded some form of extraordinary ability. In that age, power was both a promise and a trial. Triumph could expand your gifts immeasurably, but failure often unlocked unexpected strengths of its own. And now, as Ethan steps into this hidden world of alliances and rivalries, he must learn to master the gift that fate has thrust upon him, or risk being consumed by it. Centuries ago, humanity's sudden emergence of superpowered individuals bred unchecked arrogance, and ultimately, a worldwide war that wiped out the most powerful nation of all. In the aftermath, survivors buried the old empire and vowed never to repeat its mistakes. Since then, those born with extraordinary abilities have lived quietly, guided by a single edict from their elders: use your gifts only to aid one another, and never flaunt your strength. Nazi might bristle at the rules. Her sharp tongue and unpredictable moods make her a challenge to be around, but there's no denying her skill. As one of the most capable operatives among the awakened, she's earned respect by keeping a cool head in battle and showing ruthless efficiency when duty demands it. This morning, she performed a brief, but no less remarkable, ritual to mark another milestone. Her protégé, Ethan, had finally awakened. His aptitude was modest at best, nowhere near the genius-level talent Nazi herself had shown from the start, but he'd passed the basic tests. Before leaving him, she'd thrust a simple cultivation manual into his hands. It was an old text, written in terse, no-nonsense language, a starter guide, she insisted, so that he wouldn't completely squander the gift of his newfound power. "Humph," she snorted, stepping back and crossing her arms. Her amber eyes flicked over him with thinly veiled impatience. "Don't get too cocky, Ethan. You've got a long way to go before you can call yourself anything more than a trainee." Ethan bowed his head respectfully, clutching the manual. He felt a mix of gratitude and nervous excitement, and somehow, guilt. Nazi was right. His talent was limited. He'd have to work harder than anyone else to prove himself. Without waiting for a reply, Nazi turned on her heel and strode off, her cape whipping behind her. She hated leaving loose ends, but she had other puppets to check on today, others under her charge whose progress might be slipping. In her line of work, even a moment's hesitation could cost lives. As she faded into the distant corridor, Ethan watched her go. The manual felt heavy in his hands, but he opened it anyway, eager to learn whatever secrets it held. The real journey was only just beginning. Chapter 98, The Weakest Superpower. Ethan didn't know how long he'd been unconscious. When he finally came to, his head felt as if it were splitting in two. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself upright, leaning on the faithful, foolish beast and the vigilant, dark crow. One hand pressed against his throbbing temple eased the worst of the pain, and eyes heavy, he managed to open them. The beast and the crow stood close, their eyes full of concern. In a dry, hoarse voice, Ethan called out, "Beast, crow, ghost, are you all right?" A raspy chuckle drifted from behind him. "Ha!" It was Ghost. Ethan turned to see his elven ally's usual rich purple aura now reduced to a thin, wavering mist. The energy that once defined him swirled weakly, nearly dissipating into nothing. Ghost had always been one of Ethan's most powerful companions. Though Nazi's attack hadn't targeted him specifically, the residual shockwave had almost obliterated his form. Now that Ethan saw Ghost still standing, fragile but alive, a flicker of relief warmed him. No sooner had he relaxed than the pain in his skull roared back to life. Ethan grimaced, bracing himself. Whatever came next, he knew he couldn't stay down for long. The creature saw Ethan's pained expression, hesitated for a moment, then gently placed a front hoof against his temple. A soft ripple of blue energy flowed from the hoof into Ethan's head. Immediately, a cool relief spread across his temples, and the relentless headache that had been pounding at his skull finally eased. A faint tingle made him groan, but he gritted his teeth and let the healing energy do its work. Ethan stared, astonished. When had this creature developed a healing ability? Within seconds, most of the pain had dissolved. A low, throbbing pulse lingered, but it no longer slowed his movements. He pushed himself to his feet, shook his head as if waking from a dream, and muttered, "Damn, that's incredible." He'd meant something stronger, but thinking of the creature that had just saved him, he checked himself. The creature tilted its head, its gaze thoughtful and uncertain. Noticing its hesitation, Ethan stepped closer and asked, "You all right?" Ethan frowned. "Dumb beast?" At the question, the creature stirred. Its neural interface flickered on, and a slow voice echoed in Ethan's mind. "Master, you seem like you should, wake up. Wake up? What do you mean?" Ethan asked, perplexed. "Awakened? What awakens?" Just then, a slender booklet drifted down from the dark crow's beak, settling on the ground before him. Instinctively, Ethan picked it up. The cover read, "Superpower Training Manual, Volume 1. Superpowers? Awakening?" Ethan's pulse quickened. Had he, after that sudden strike, actually awakened some latent ability? From the shadows ambushed the dumb beast, the dark crow, and the ghost exchanged furtive glances and gave a simultaneous nod. Though none of them could intervene directly, they'd clearly sensed the shift in Ethan's inner aura. A faint superpower had indeed stirred within him. Ethan flipped through the pages, but he felt nothing. "Why don't I sense anything?" he muttered. His three companions looked equally puzzled. Even they had no explanation for this sudden, silent awakening. Ethan scowled. The Dark Raven and the ghosts claim no right to lecture him. They themselves possess no superhuman gifts. Sure, some beasts inherit their powers at birth, but he'd never learned anything about awakening abilities through sheer force of will. His gaze fell on the slim manual in his hand, the training guide left behind by Nazi. It had to hold the answers he needed. Though barely a pamphlet, it was refreshingly direct. The opening page explained the most basic principle: channel your energy into an object, then will it to move or change shape. For a newly awakened individual, it said, the simplest test was to shift something with your mind. Heart pounding, Ethan shut the booklet and stared at a fist-sized stone on the ground. He clenched his fists at his sides, focused every ounce of his willpower, end that rock, and felt veins throb in his temples as his eyes crossed from the effort. Still, the stone remained unmoved. "Maybe that one's too big," he muttered. Unconvinced, he picked up a smaller, thumb-sized pebble. Taking a steadying breath, he refocused and prepared to try again. A pale blue aura shimmered around the small stone at Ethan's feet. He concentrated, and under his will, it rose gently into the air. Yan's eyes flickered with surprise, but after a moment, he relaxed his focus, and the stone dropped back to the ground with a soft snap. "So it really is an awakening ability," Yan murmured, kneeling to inspect the pebble. "But it's so weak it hardly does anything." Ethan's heart fluttered with excitement at the thought of having awakened a superpower, then sank as he considered how feeble it was. Not to mention the Nazis, even the mindless beasts in the training grounds far outclassed this. Jan stood and offered Ethan a small nod. "Don't be discouraged. You got something, even if it's minor. With practice, it might grow stronger." Superpowers came in every form, and even the slightest edge could prove critical in battle, if you learned to develop it. What Ethan didn't yet realize was that, by normal standards, he shouldn't have been able to awaken any ability at all. Having lived through 3 separate lives had honed his mental strength beyond that of ordinary humans, and even so, acquiring a power remained an extraordinary feat. Nazi's palm, crackling with raw power, was the spark that reignited Ethan's consciousness. Nazi had only meant to punish him, to freeze him in place for hours by directing his energy at his brain, but in doing so, he inadvertently shattered the mental shackles suppressing Ethan's latent abilities. In that moment of accidental mercy, Ethan's powers awoke. He bolted upright, adrenaline surging through his veins. Discovering his newfound strength was a revelation, yet as he looked at Nazi's stunned, helpless expression, guilt and frustration warred inside him. Despite the gift of power, he felt painfully weak. He slid the instruction manual back into his belt pouch. This ruined chamber was no place to experiment. they'd lingered too long. It was time to go. First, he scooped up the small imp clutching its glowing orb. The timid wraith melted into a nearby shadow without a sound. When a hesitant black crow flapped onto his shoulder, Ethan draped his dark cloak over the bird, concealing its wings. Satisfied, he glanced once more at the disordered room and slipped away into the night. Chapter 99. Replenishing Supplies. Ethan slipped back into the sprawling black market, its winding alleys alive with haggling voices and exotic scents. His first stop was the elf sales booth, a modest stall hung with pale green banners. There he unloaded the 4 elf creatures he'd forgotten to sell earlier and walked away with 50,000 union coins. It wasn't a windfall, but every coin counted. Next, he made his way to the market's largest emporium, where shelves overflowed with wares from every corner of the Alliance. His eyes were locked on one simple item, a storage ring boasting 5 cubic meters of extra-dimensional space. The ring itself was unremarkable, an unadorned band of silver that snapped comfortably onto his right index finger. 50,000 coins vanished from his pouch, but Ethan didn't hesitate. The storage belt the rockets had given him on Trial Island held only a single cubic meter, and its glaring rocket emblem would draw unwanted attention in Alliance territory. A new, inconspicuous storage tool was essential. It wasn't as if elves were stingy with space storage technology. In their world, these pocket dimensions were commonplace. Yet Ethan couldn't help raising an eyebrow at the price. 5 cubic meters for 50,000 coins sounded steep, until he remembered the cheapest elf spheres, the so-called storage orbs for capturing and holding creatures, still fetched around 200 union coins apiece. In that light, the ring was a bargain. Clutching his new purchase, Ethan allowed himself a small smile. Better to invest now than waste time rummaging through that cramped rocket belt later. With his funds replenished and his inventory expanded, he was ready for the challenges ahead. I transferred everything from Rocket's belt into the new ring I'd just bought. Barring any mishaps, this ring will be my primary storage device from now on. With my inventory neatly tucked away, I headed straight for the elf food shop, not to stock up on power cubes, but to gather the rare ingredients I need to craft high-grade energy cubes. These won't be your run-of-the-mill tree fruits or common herbs. I'm tailoring each batch to match the unique metabolism of every elf in my party, and that means sourcing specialty materials. Frankly, I wasn't impressed by the shop's prefab energy cubes, even the so-called high-level ones, but when I saw their price tags, I couldn't help but sigh. A single universal energy cube, one that any elf can digest, goes for 500 union coins. 500 for just one cube. An average elf can polish off dozens in a single meal, and the more powerful they are, the larger their appetite becomes. That means a single feast can easily cost tens of thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands, of union coins. It's enough to make your head spin. Ethan's heart skipped a beat each time he glanced at the price tag. With his current cultivation level, there was no way he could produce high-grade power cubes himself, and if anyone ever discovered that he actually possessed the skill to refine them, disaster would follow, not fortune. This underground shop was run by a consortium of incubators from Golden City, including a senior incubator whose reputation alone kept even the boldest black market dealers in line. That's why Ethan felt uneasy as he handed over 1 million Alliance coins in a single transaction. To the ordinary clerk behind the counter, a purchase like this was unheard of. Most customers stocked up on standard power cubes at the Elven food store. Ethan, however, had no use for the popular trinkets. Instead, he hunted down the rarest, most sinister items on display, and the clerk's curious gaze followed his every move. Of course, that reaction came only from someone ignorant of true cultivation circles. Any seasoned breeder who recognized Ethan's selection would immediately deduce his level of skill and potentially mark him as a target. Ethan finally slid 2 small vials across the counter. The first contained powder derived from a long-dead, quasi-Heru-level black drago, N, saturated with the densest, most malevolent energy imaginable. The second held feather dust from a fallen quasi-Ui-grade dark crow, a substance valued even higher than conventional dark crow energy extract. Both ingredients were notoriously difficult to obtain, and each played a vital role in the most advanced alchemical formulas. As the clerk wrapped the vials in oil-proof cloth, Ethan slipped them into his satchel. 1,000,000 coins, and a few strange looks later, he slipped out into the rain-silenced alleys of Golden City, certain that no one but him understood just how crucial these powders would soon become. Ethan surveyed the strange ingredients piled on the counter and ran a hand through his hair. These were precisely what he needed to craft essence waters and advanced energy blocks for his 3 contracted beasts: the simple beast, the mist geyser, and the unborn scorpion. For the simple beast, he'd bought nothing more exotic than powdered inferior sage stone and a slab of Tyrannosaurus scale. The mist geyser, however, demanded far rarer materials: a sliver of special binding energy, the single most expensive item, a pinch of black mud poison compound, and a scrap of ghost cloth steeped in spectral residue. As for the unborn scorpion, Ethan had secured a fragment of Heracrosian carapace, celebrated for its ghostly venom properties, so that the creature's energy blocks would match its poisonous nature. Together, these odd and valuable ingredients had set him back exactly 1,000,000 alliance coins. It was a hefty sum, but Ethan knew it was an investment. Once he paired them with the right tree fruits and medicinal herbs, another 100,000 coins worth, he would be able to distill advanced energy blocks 10 times more valuable than his initial outlay. With the purchases complete, he could finally return to his workshop and begin the delicate process of alchemical synthesis. Ethan left the shop with just 700,000 Union coins to his name. With the clerk's help, he transferred the entire sum onto the Union-registered bank card linked to his identity chip, and then tossed aside the old anonymous black card. Though anonymity can offer cover, he couldn't risk the Rockets tracing his transactions. Only a day ago, he'd pocketed 3.6 million coins. Now more than 3/4 of it was gone. It was a stark reminder of just how expensive it is to raise an elf. Even producing energy blocks for basic sustenance costs a small fortune. Ordinary people would have to pour in vast sums just to keep one elf alive, and that's before they began buying higher-grade materials as the creature's power level climbed. Beside him, Hagi, his weary, foolish-looking beast, stumbled along, its limbs heavy with exhaustion. Ethan guided it through a discreet exit at the back of the Black Market District, careful not to draw any attention. In Golden City, he knew better than to let Hagi act on impulse and risk exposure. Ethan stepped out of the Black Market alley, every muscle aching. He'd barely escaped Nosley's ambush, and though her attack had triggered his heart shadows and unlocked his latent superpower, he still dreaded facing such a powerful enemy without any real defense. Slipping into a shadowed corner, he quickly discarded the scavenged gear he'd been wearing and pulled on his old team uniform underneath. Then he flagged down a car and sped straight for the Elven Alliance Center in the heart of the city. By the time he arrived, the sky had turned completely dark. Blinking against the streetlights, Ethan realized he must have blacked out for 3 or 4 hours when Nosley struck. At the guarded entrance, he produced his Alliance ID. The officer barely glanced at it before granting him access to a private suite. Ethan spent a handful of Alliance coins to have elven delicacies, freshly baked almond pastries, roasted root vegetables, and crisp forest greens, delivered straight to his door. He tore into the meal with the ferocity of a man starved of both food and rest. When the plates were empty, he collapsed onto the soft bed. His body throw, bad from the day's chaos, and a dull headache pulsed behind his eyes, the aftershock of awakening his new power. At last, cocooned in the safe, serene quiet of the Elven Center, Ethan surrendered to the deep exhaustion that washed over him and slipped into a dreamless sleep. As long as there's neither war nor terrorist threat, the Elven Center stands as an emblem of unity and a bastion of safety. I suggest enjoying it in the afternoon. If you liked it, please bookmark and share your recommendation. Chapter 100, Crafting Advanced Energy Blocks. Ethan stirred awake shortly before dawn, his body clock still keyed to the rhythms of the trial island. The pounding headache that had tormented him since his superpower erupted the day before had finally subsided after a deep, uninterrupted sleep. He sat up on the edge of his straw pallet, glancing around as the first pale rays of morning light filtered through the Elven Center's lattice windows. At his feet, the 3 lion-like training golems whimpered softly, eager to begin the day, while the dark-feathered crow familiars perched silently on low beams, their red eyes glittering in the half-light. Ethan waved for a staff attendant, and within minutes a sturdy wooden tray appeared, piled with fresh fruit, honeyed bread, and steaming bowls of porridge. He and 3 of the resident elves, his breakfast companions for the morning, settled around a long, low table. As they ate, the elves ran through basic indoor drills, their blades carving graceful patterns in the air, careful not to reveal too much of their skill in a public area. With breakfast finished, Ethan laid out today's agenda. First on the list was the production of new energy cubes. His supply of mid-grade cubes, essential for fueling the dark-feathered crows, was nearly exhausted. And ever since the shadowy beast known as Shade had joined their ranks, the strain on raw materials had grown even greater. Without fresh energy blocks, his familiars would weaken, and his own abilities would be difficult to manage. Ethan excused himself from the training hall and made his way to the small workshop carved into the center's northern wing. Shelves lined with glass vials and bundles of exotic minerals greeted him at the door. It was here, among the humming enchantments and the soft glow of mana-infused crystals, that he would begin transforming raw materials into the advanced energy blocks his team so desperately needed. Ethan sat at his workbench, running through his schedule for the day. In 2 days, the scorpion-tail scorpions would hatch, and as insect-type brood, their growth rate was alarmingly fast. He had to prepare energy cubes now. Better to have them on hand well before the spawn than scramble at the last minute. He also remembered the massive milk tank he'd bought on the black market yesterday. He hadn't opened its containment unit yet, and whatever elf orbs he'd stored inside must be starving by now. Taming that creature, or at least feeding and stabilizing it, was another urgent task for today. Ethan decided on a simple plan. Spend the morning fabricating a batch of energy cubes, pause before lunch to release and feed the milk tank, then devote the afternoon to his indoor combat drills while finishing off the remaining cubes. He cleared the table and laid out the raw materials he'd purchased yesterday. Plump tree fruit, bundles of medicinal herbs, and several vials of rare catalysts. From beneath the bench, he lifted a sleek case containing his medium-grade energy cube fabrication tools, 5 precision instruments, each worth hundreds of thousands of alliance coins and designed for one specific step in the condensation process. Finally, he set out a row of identical molding containers, ready to capture the condensed energy in perfect cube form. With everything in place, Ethan took a deep breath and began the delicate work of producing energy cubes, an essential investment in both the new brood's future and his own training regimen. Ethan had spent yesterday's coin on a risky purchase from the island's black market, and today he was eager to see it in action. The contraption he'd smuggled in replaced all the clumsy, oversized machines that once cluttered the trial island. At a fraction of the cost, it promised to crank out high-grade energy cubes in record time. He set to work at dawn. First, he pounded the crystalline cores on a tempered steel slab, then funneled the broken fragments into a heated reactor for separation. Next came the stirring, 24 whirling paddles blending powders and essences, before finally compressing the mixture into uniform cubes. Thanks to the new device's microprocessor-guided cycles, each step snapped into the next. What once took hours now wrapped up in mere minutes, over 10 times faster than the old method. Around him, Ethan's small troop of elves hovered like moths to a flame, their eyes bright with anticipation. 2 of them darted forward to taste the fine dust settling at his feet. Another carefully lifted a newly formed cube to inhale its aroma. Ethan couldn't help but laugh. The scent of these high-level blocks was richer, almost intoxicating, compared to the bland mid-tier batches they'd used before. He tapped the control panel and scrolled through the chip's interface. This wasn't a one-size-fits-all recipe. Buried in the device's database were profiles for each elf in Ethan's charge. Every strength, every magic affinity, even their preferred growth trajectory. The machine adjusted its formulas on the fly, so that every cube it produced was custom-tuned to unlock maximum potential in its intended recipient. No other elves anywhere could benefit from these blocks as his would. At last, he flipped the final tray of gleaming cubes onto the workbench and stepped back, satisfied. Product profile name, unknown energy block core ingredients. Corrupted energy powder, aerial essence powder, dark fruit extract, citrus infusion, plus proprietary enhancers. Effect, dramatically accelerates an elf's growth rate and magical energy reserves. Ethan swept his hand over the tray. In moments, his elves would devour these blocks, and with them, he'd leapfrog years of training and evolution. The trial island was about to witness a very different kind of progress. Ethan tapped through the chip's schematics, surprised by one peculiar rule. The lower the elf level of an energy block, the stronger its effect. A warning flashed beneath it, for Dark Crow use only. According to the data, every cube he'd just produced shared the same basic blueprint. When filtered for different user types, the cubes took on distinct appearances. Ones calibrated for Dark Crows, whether black or white variants, and those for beastly allies glowed pale blue beneath a translucent coating. The ghost-type blocks, by contrast, had a muted, frosted sheen. Normally, crafting advanced energy blocks was painstaking work. But thanks to his new fabrication rig, Ethan was actually outpacing his own output of mid-level cubes. In just 3 hours, he'd churned out nearly 1,000 of each type, enough rations to keep the Dark Crow squad supplied for the next 2 weeks, though it had eaten up almost half his raw materials. As he rested between runs, Ethan scrolled through the chip library and discovered another blueprint, a medium-grade energy block optimized for the team's heavy milk tanker support unit. Since that unit wasn't meant for combat, it didn't need raw power. What it did need was speedier milk production and richer nutrient content. This specialized cube would not only boost its output, but also infuse the milk with extra trace elements. As a bonus, the formula promised a modest improvement in the tanker's own stamina and overall vitality. Ethan smiled. With these new blocks in hand, the Dark Crows would be stronger and better fed than ever before. Ethan hadn't crafted any advanced energy cubes yet. He still needed to track down the right ingredients. If he managed to find them later, he planned to brew special cubes just for his new mill tank. Of course, Ethan was determined to treat every Pokémon on his team with the same respect, provided they gave their all too. Once he'd produced a sufficient stock of energy cubes, he could turn his full attention to training the mill tank he'd recently acquired. He rented a small, secluded training field in the corner of Golden City's Pokémon Center and called forth his stalwart companion, Rock, from its Pokéball. Even though a rare, shimmering Pokémon might stop passers-by in their tracks, Rock's plain, earthy appearance barely registered amid the hustle and bustle of the region's largest Tai. Ethan was grateful for the anonymity. Fewer onlookers meant a far smoother practice session. Satisfied that Rock was comfortable with the surroundings, Ethan retrieved the mill tank's Pokéball. He flipped the safety latch, pressed the release button, and sent the ball spinning into the open space. A beam of scarlet light burst forth, and when it faded, the powerful mill tank stood before him, ready to begin its first real workout. Even though he'd skipped a couple of meals, Ethan still felt surprisingly energetic. Before him stood the enormous milk tank, 2 curved, bull-like horns jutting from its sides. Its deep-set eyes gleamed with undisguised loathing. It didn't move to attack, but it made clear it wanted nothing to do with a human. To Ethan's relief, the creature's hostility seemed aimed at humans in general, rather than at him personally. "Big milk tank," he called out, meeting its glare. "I know you don't like humans, but right now you're no match for me." He kept his tone steady and sincere. This massive milk tank was a wild elf, a member of a small, reclusive tribe that lived far from civilization. Wild elves respected only one thing above all else: strength. Unlike the elves trained and bred by skilled handlers, these forest-born folk relied solely on their own power. To survive, they had to honor anyone capable of besting them. Ethan's words hung in the air, and the milk tank hesitated. Its eyes shifted, studying him with keen interest. Since leaving Trial Island, it hadn't met an opponent it deemed worthy, and now it felt an unfamiliar thrill, a subtle itch for battle. After a long moment of silence, the milk tank gave a slow, deliberate shake of its massive head. It wasn't a refusal, and it certainly wasn't an attack. It was acknowledgement, respect for strength, the one language both would understand. The tension tightened between them. Neither man nor beast would yield, and at any moment, one of them would have to make the first move. Could you please provide the complete chapter text you'd like rewritten? That way I can ensure I preserve every plot point, character detail, and scene while polishing it into flowing, idiomatic English.